All right, here's one. I have not commented on the critical drinker publicly, but there's been a lot of talk from people on like the Sardonicast subreddit, and like he's definitely he's definitely a subject of conversation when it comes to online film reviewers, because he seems to embody this sort of if you want my full perspective of like art and viewing art and your experience with art, it's really just like anybody can have their own experience, right? And so I've always been open to this idea of like, you know, even if somebody comes at a film from a completely different perspective as me for, you know, various artistic reasons or even political reasons, like I'm kind of interested in that. I'm kind of interested in, you know, especially why the critical drinker has like such a large audience, you know, why it's relating to so many people. He got like a Russell Crowe interview. Like Russell Crowe loves his shit. Gotta fact check to make sure it was Russell Crowe and not somebody else. Hold on. Yeah, like Russell Crowe, like just flat out watches his shit, which is like really interesting. And so like I think after a certain point, like they're having like a full-on interview here, right?
Speaks for itself. It's Russell Crowe, man, and he's right here talking.
That's kind of interesting, right? And so at a certain point, regardless of how much a lot of people might not like the critical drinker, I think it's important to try and understand why he's connecting with people, to try and understand what it is about him that is speaking to people in such a particular way, or the fact that like he's got like almost 2 million subs. He's got almost 2 million subs. Like the guy's doing fucking great. And most of what he's talking about is essentially just like Hollywood's woke, right? And my biggest criticism with the critical drinker, as a person that has not watched all of his videos, obviously, but as a person that's seen, you know, like I've clicked on a fair amount of things, and maybe not recently, but I've clicked on a fair amount of things and have essentially just walked away with the idea of like, okay, you're a person creating film reviews for like the average audience member, but not like one that's like really into film as like an art form. Is that like an incorrect thing to say? Like, I know people personally that don't know anything about movies, but they know who the critical drinker is. And like everything, like there's people. So one of my friends has a sibling who has fallen down kind of like a conspiracy rabbit hole and gets their news from like BitChute, you know, and are like concerned about like how George Soros is going to make people eat bugs or something. And like I talked to her and her boyfriend trying to like have like a common group, because like, you know, I'm not going to confront people directly about these sorts of things. Like I'm more interested in like learning who they are and understanding them, and like even if they're like they have wildly different beliefs and are insane, you know, I tried to relate to him and just, you know, her boyfriend, and just being like, you know, what sort of things do you watch on YouTube? Do you know, like film stuff? And he's like, oh, I watch the critical drinker. And that will always leave an impression on me. The fact that like this guy, who every single thing that he consumes online is just like purely conspiracy content, the only film channel he could name was the critical drinker. And he's like, oh yeah, I like the critical drinker. And that was it. And all he knew about movies was just that movies are woke now. And that I guess the powers that be, like some sort of like overarching force that's trying to like they're trying to like make your kids trans or something, like, and sure, that's one person. I get it. Like it's maybe it's not representative of every critical drinker fan. I get it. But there's something about his content that just like it really oozes like this is the type of shit where you would expose people who don't really care about movies to only care about movies through like a purely political lens, right? Like a lot of his videos are just like, okay, movies are bad now because there's woke things and woke people are doing it, right? Like that you know, like I wish that I could expose someone like this to more films. I wish that I could expose someone like this to like having a healthier media diet, because it seems like the type of person that thinks that all movies are bad now. Like what is the name of your series, right? Like Why Modern Movies Suck, right? Like that's a series on the channel. Why Modern Movies Suck. You know, it's not necessarily that modern movies suck. It's that there's a handful of like popular studio modern movies that suck. And if you go back in time, to like, you know, whenever you think that the golden age of movies is 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s, whatever, like you'll realize that there's a lot of things that were A, financially successful, and B, nominated for a bunch of Academy Awards that were also shit, right? And we're left with this sort of like bias of what we think the past is, because we only remember what is the greatest, you know, most influential, memorable, classic things of the time period, right? So, you know, when you think of 70s music, you don't think of every single song that existed in the 70s that you heard on the radio. You think of, you know, the songs that still hold true to this day, like, you know, I want to know, have you ever seen the rain? Like, what is that? CCR Clear? I don't remember the band's name. But, you know, there's certain things that stand the test of time, and I think that it's kind of a weird bias that human beings have in terms of how we think about media, where Creedence Clearwater Revival, that's such a long mouthful of a name. It's such an interesting weird bias that we have about media, where we think like all music sucks now or all movies suck now and here's why, when in reality it's like you just have to know what to watch. You just have to like have a healthy media diet and be willing to try new things and not just only watch what is essentially just advertised to you and spoon-fed to you through giant corporations. So I haven't watched this, but I found myself being interested enough to like do any kind of commentary on this guy, even though I haven't done it before, because of the fact that he showed up on Russell Brand, which sort of kind of reinforces my initial thought about him, is that he's showing up on what is really a political, you know, anti-vax, conspiracy, grifting platform, and he's showing up as this guy like, so this is the title. So this is why movies are shit now, with the critical drinker. It's like, okay, well, you know, this is kind of what I experienced anecdotally when I, you know, met somebody who was essentially just eating up a bunch of conspiracy anti-vax content, like weird, like New World Order, George Soros, you know, maybe not explicitly saying it, but pretty much saying it content. This is not a movie review channel, and he's being featured on it. And so I just thought that this was interesting enough to at least see what the fuck it is. So let's see what this is. Free preview? Okay, yeah, we have to subscribe to his fucking whole fucking website or whatever. He might as well be on the Daily Wire, I guess.
Hey, you Awakening Wonders, thanks for joining me on Stay Free with Russell Brand. I'm very excited about today's show. For the first 15
He used to be a comedy actor.
minutes, I'm going to be on YouTube, and that's going to be relevant to you 6.5 million Awakening Wonders over there.
Awakening. It's funny that he uses the term awakening, because like if a leftist or left-leaning person, or even someone like Joe Biden said awakening, they would be like, it means woke.
because you surely love The Critical Drinker, a man who has analysed and critiqued contemporary cinema with a perspective that you're unlikely to see in the mainstream.
I think we are definitely stuck in a rut as a culture when it comes to just...
See, this is something that I take a bit of an issue with, is like prioritizing the idea of like, my culture, right? Like, I don't know if I give too much of a shit about, like, I'm an individual, you know, I'm an individual. Like I like movies that I like, and I like movies from a variety of cultures. Like if America decides to go in certain trends about movies, like I'm going to call it out, right? I'm going to call out America mostly for not being exposed to different cultures. But like, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of fear mongering when it comes to like, movies are getting like too feminist, or movies are like getting too what, like, I don't know. It seems like weird fear mongering shit. Maybe I'm reading a bit too far into it. He's barely said anything. But I will add more commentary in a bit. Also, I want to point out, after thoroughly seeing a lot of like back and forth about people that hate The Critical Drinker on like my subreddit or the Sardonicast subreddit, and other subreddits, you know, like obviously he's met with a lot of criticism. I do want to point out that I've seen a bunch of criticism against him that I thought was like a little unfair. Where like, oh, he didn't like, you know, like he didn't think of like the right name of a movie at a time, or he like, you know, didn't have the right word when he said, like, he was on a live stream or whatever. Like sometimes people are a little too like overly critical or jumping the gun when it's like, this guy's like right leaning. It's like, okay, you know, whatever. Like I don't hate anybody just because they're conservative, right? Like, but I'm at least going to have a conversation about what I find disagreeable about them.
Relying on the past.
As you say, the motivation behind these...
I find that funny because he's sorry, we've barely started.
We are definitely stuck in a rut as a culture when it comes to just relying on the past.
Damn, hearing that whole sentence is so interesting because the content that I've consumed from him, and again, I have not watched all of his content, what I've seen is like literally what he's describing, right? Like, oh, we're stuck in a rut where we're all the content is relying on the past, when all I hear him talk about is like, why can't we have movies like they were in the 80s? Like every single video I've seen from him is like, oh, I wish movies were like they were from the past, but now they're different and bad. So that's kind of interesting, actually.
As you say, the motivation behind these IPs and these franchise movies is no one's willing to take a risk.
What they lack with these modern characters.
See, that's not untrue what Russell Brand just said. Like, I want to see more risk taking in franchise big budget movies.
That they try to do is that they're not willing to take that step of have them fail and be vulnerable and have...
This is not untrue. He's saying very true things here.
Flaws and weaknesses.
We're going to talk about...
Oh, wait. Sorry. Wait, what? Okay, wait. I thought he was talking about the actual production, not characters.
These franchise movies is no one's willing to take a risk.
What they lack with these modern characters that they try...
Oh, he's talking purely about characters. Okay, this is one that I have to think about more. I was talking about funding. I was talking about like, oh yeah, we want movies with ideas and scripts that take more risks. He's talking about like characters that are like flawed. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that as a trend, but I'll have to hear him out.
Do is that they're not willing to take that step of have them fail and be vulnerable and have flaws and weaknesses.
We're going to talk about Sound of Freedom. Why is this movie causing so much controversy?
Oh, I would love to hear the Critical Drinker talk about Sound of Freedom.
I'm also going to start referring to the Critical Drinker by his actual human name, and I'm going to ask you to remove them aviators. Not yet, not while we're still
Are we getting a face reveal?
Still on YouTube.
Oh, we have to go to the website to get the face reveal? Oh god.
Stay free with Russell Brand. See it first on Rumble.
On Rumble, where we can be a bit more explicit about our anti-vaccine nonsense.
Is the Critical Drinker. Drinker, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, man. I can't believe it. I'm sandwiched right between Tucker Carlson and Ron DeSantis. I've got a lot to live up to on this one.
Is he on Tucker Carlson and Ron? Sorry. Oh, he's sandwiched as in, was that who Russell Brand had on before and after?
You better come.
Oh my god, he held them up as like idols. That's fucking fascinating. This is amazing.
Drinker, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, man. I can't believe it. I'm sandwiched right between Tucker Carlson and Ron DeSantis. I've got a lot to live up to on this one.
Damn, like even I feel like even if I were like conservative Republican, like to hold Ron DeSantis up as like a person to like have to live up to, yeah, that's like praising Ted Cruz. Ron DeSantis is as lame as Ted Cruz. Like he's as pathetic and as much of a loser. Like Ron DeSantis is only a name now because he's been popular in Florida and people are seeing him as like the only alternative to Trump, when in reality, like he's going to get absolutely fucking crushed in the primaries. Like Ron DeSantis has zero chance. Like, this is insane.
You better come
Like nobody's gonna even know Ron DeSantis' name after a while.
up with some pretty powerful right-wing ideology right now. It better be slide it into your reviews somehow if you can. Otherwise, you simply will not fit in with the roster. Thanks for joining us, mate.
No, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on, man.
One of your most recent
What was that? Was that like an ironic I was kind of confused what he was trying to get at there.
videos that I enjoyed watching was your analysis and review of the latest Indiana Jones movie. It seemed you kind of reached in a sense, a zenith of your analysis in itself.
See, Russell Brand didn't even like believe in any of this shit politically until it got him views. Like he's such a fucking grifter. He's as much of a grifter as like who's the woman who does Goop? Gwyneth Paltrow. Like it's literally just like follow the money shit, right? Like Russell Brand is the male Gwyneth Paltrow. You know, maybe Joe Rogan is a bit, but Joe Rogan, I at least believe that he believes what he's saying, whereas Russell Brand, I don't believe that he believes what he's saying.
For what Lynch might call the duck's eye, the point within the point. It seemed to me that what you were saying is that our culture is incapable of coming up with new and novel and innovative content, and it's kind of like a Tomb Raider dragging cadavers from the soil, reanimating them, and then not even respecting them. Is that the essence of your perspective on sort of mainstream movie franchises, and what do you think that tells us more broadly?
So, like, we have to be asking ourselves, why is Russell Brand a guy who literally only does like conspiracy shit now, and like literally just like, I'm going on Rumble and I'm going to be very critical of vaccines in a way that is not allowed on YouTube, right? Like that's his whole shtick. For him to have on like the critical drinkers, like what does that tell you, right? I'm not gonna say like, oh, that means critical drinkers content is that, but like a lot of it kind of feeds into the same audience, you know? It's
That indeed, that is your perspective, Drinker.
I think that's wildly wrong, because that metaphor you just gave me would have at least been entertaining, unlike this movie. No, like I think we are definitely stuck in a rut as a culture when it comes to just relying on the past and just like,
man, I can't believe that he said that, because isn't that all of his content, just saying like movies in the past were better?
digging up old ideas, like you say, bringing back old characters, old actors, and just kind of humiliating them on screen and trying.
I mean, like, I think the critical drinker and I agree on this, that like they're rehashing old IPs and you need to have new ideas, and it would be better if risks were taken. Like, I think that there are some basic things that we could agree on for sure. Maybe we have like different political leanings and different interpretations of things in the long run, right?
Use them as this weird springboard to launch like a new generation of characters, but they're never any good. They're always unlikable idiots who just bore people to tears.
They're never any good. They're always unlikable idiots that just bore people to tears. Like, I think that that's a... Man, like... It's not untrue what he's saying, but it reflects like a very narrow media diet. You know, it reflects a very narrow consumption of films, which is always like that's like most of the issue I have with, like, you know, the types of reviews that the critical drinker makes are kind of like the types of reviews that like Ben Shapiro makes, where it's like you're subjecting yourself to like very few films in a year. Like, of course you're going to be mad at them.
And that's the fun.
Like, you're not really going outside of your what is it called? Like your purview, your peripherals. You know, you're not really like trying to experience the best films in a year if all you're going to watch is like the new Indiana Jones and the new Star Wars, and, you know,
fundamental problem. We've lost the ability to create new innovative stuff. What we do,
and I'm
now
sure he would argue and say like he saw The Whale, right? But that's also like a big internet known movie, right?
is just reiterate the things that have been done before, and you
I think he loved Free Guy also.
can apply it to movies, TV shows, music, like anything.
I think he did love RRR. I think he actually recommended that. He loved Free Guy and RRR.
Like we're just recycling the same things we've done so many times already. It's such a sad thing to look back on. Like generations from now, they're going to look back on this time and just think of it as the time when everyone just lost their imagination. They lost their spirit of creativity.
I disagree, because I think it's only going to get worse. I disagree with what he's saying of like, oh, generations are going to look back at this time and, you know, be like, oh, this is when they lost their imagination. Like, it's going to get a lot. The trend is going in one direction. It's not going back.
Creativity.
It's very interesting that you take it to something as essential as the spirit of creativity.
We're going to get AI art in the next like 5 years. We're going to get like competent AI generated movies in the next like 10 years. Right?
Itself, I've got young daughters, they're 5 and 6. Their favorite band is the Spice Girls. Like, we listen to the Spice Girls, and then like some other kids were getting dropped off at the school, like similar age, they were listening to the Spice Girls. There doesn't even something in the culture which I think at the time I would have certainly regarded as a sort of a commodity, even though it had a great deal of spirit, and there's aspects of the Spice Girls that I liked, details that I certainly won't be going into right now. What I'd like to say is that it's odd that even something that's commercial, you know, we're not talking about like Joan Jett, we're talking about the Spice Girls.
You could, I mean, okay, I understand what you're saying. You could say that about a lot of generations, right? Depending on what culture you're in, depending on like what you're exposed to, like there's still new things that like newer generations are being exposed to, right? Like, you know, the Spice Girls wasn't like the cutoff point for creativity in music or like even catchiness in music, right? Like me as a child, my brother as a child, like we were exposed to like what my dad listened to. Like he listened to a bunch of 70s music, right? So for you to say like, oh, my daughters listen to the Spice Girls because I showed them the Spice Girls, and also their friends listen to the Spice Girls because their parents showed them the Spice Girls, that's just indicative of you being from a generation that listened to the Spice Girls, and also other generations of parents having children that listen to the Spice Girls, right? Like there were plenty of kids my age when I grew up, and my brother's age, that listened to 70s shit because their parents showed them that, right? That doesn't mean that they didn't listen to new shit, right?
Even like those kind of commodities aren't being replaced. And also with like Glastonbury, Elton John being the sort of closing act, it makes you wonder, well, where's it going to go? Now, do you think this is because of economics? Do you think it's because of technology? For example, it's been sort of oft stated that there isn't a new raft of movie stars coming through anymore. Like, is that because of...
There isn't a new raft of movie styles coming in? What the fuck are you talking about? You're not watching the right movies is the problem. This is what pisses me off about this. This is the same reason I was pissed off, like, when people were acting like Crazy Rich Asians was like, oh yeah, finally we can have Asian people in a movie. I'm like, I've been trying to recommend like fucking Korean movies this entire time. Like telling people to watch this shit, you know, like I get it. It's different. It's like Asian American, whatever. Like I've updated my perspective on that, but it is frustrating as a person that is actively seeking out art and like trying to find experiences that are meaningful and like purposeful to me, and then people are acting as if those experiences don't exist when they just like they don't even make the effort and they don't even try to like seek these things out. Like, you know, thank fucking Christ Parasite got as popular as it did, you know? Like, but part of the problem is like it literally takes the movie being such a big hit and like winning best picture for like people to see it. Like it has to spread so vigorously through not only word of mouth but through like heavy advertising, right? Whereas like people just like, I don't know why people are so scared to like go to a film festival, why people are so scared to like watch an indie movie that's like, you know, be more engaged and more interested in the type of media you consume. Like, why are people so scared? Like, it seems like nobody fucking talks about the shit that's interesting to me. And that's part of what's frustrating about this, you know?
Of the culture? Is that because of technology? And of course, I know those two things are inextricably linked, but what do you put it down to?
Yeah, I mean, I think the last movie star that we have still active really now that's
Tom
relevant
Cruise?
is Tom Cruise.
I knew
he's
he was
got
gonna say
Mission
it.
Impossible coming out soon. That's probably going to do really well this summer. Top Gun Maverick.
What do you mean by movie star? Do you mean action star? Tom Cruise isn't the last movie star. Maybe he's the last person. Like I feel like that's a real generational bias when you say that Tom Cruise is the last movie star. Like Ryan Gosling is gonna be like pretty fucking famous by the time he's like 50, 60 something, right? Like if he isn't already, like star of the Barbie movie, star of like so many, the Drive and all this shit. Like I'm sure you love Drive, you know? Like I'm sure Drive is a very easily accessible movie to like even people like Critical Drinker, right? Like Ryan Gosling is, you know, maybe not like action star like Tom Cruise. Like I don't know. Like I understand what you mean. I understand what you're saying, but I also feel like Tom Cruise has been around way longer than current generation stars in the sense that like maybe we'll see movie stars that are just as big, but they're not from America. Maybe we'll see movie stars that are just as big, but they're not necessarily known for action, right? Like, I don't know if I'm comfortable saying that it's like the last we're ever going to see. Chris Pratt, that's a good example. Chris Pratt's like probably fucking huge in so many places, right?
Did great last year. But yeah, like there's a problem now in movies, particularly where we don't have movie stars anymore. We have characters that people are excited to see. You know, so it's particularly with comic book movies, with all this superhero stuff, it'll be.
This is not necessarily untrue. It is an observation that I've definitely seen popularized before he said it. But yeah, let's hear him out.
A case of, hey, we're going to go and see the new Captain America movie. We're going to see the new Thor movie. We don't care about the actor that's playing him, really. It's just like the character that we're going to see. And so that then doesn't translate into a star who can sell movies, who can.
This is a weird one because it is kind of a trend, but I don't necessarily like. I think what we're seeing, like, I think we kind of agree, but we might phrase it in different ways. Where it's like we see a lot of actors that are going into superhero roles and reprising those roles, and so it's like Robert Downey Jr. for like a fucking decade at least is not Robert Downey Jr. He's Iron Man, right? Chris Pratt is still Chris Pratt. Like he's, you know, Chris Pratt's a really good example to kind of contradict this, isn't he? Like Chris Pratt is still getting so many roles that like he was in the fucking Mario movie, right? Like why did he get cast for that? And he's doing very well outside of Marvel stuff. You know, he's doing Jurassic World. I mean, that's done, but still, you know, massively financially successful. I don't know if I necessarily wholeheartedly agree with the idea that there's no movie stars anymore, but I will say that I guess it feels kind of different with stars in general. So like you could say the same thing about music. You could say the same thing about like we'll never see a music star as big as Michael Jackson. And I think that has less to do with the quality of music that's available and more to do with people maybe like over time globally getting kind of more level-headed when it comes to the idea of like celebrity worship culture. Like maybe that has a bit something more to do with it. Like I think people worship Tom Cruise in like a very obsessive, like weird fucking way. In the same way that like people did that recently with like, I don't know, Kanye and Kim Kardashian, like all these tabloid people, like Brad, you could say the same thing about like Brad Pitt and like fucking, I don't know, Jennifer Aniston and who was the other woman, Tomb Raider, you know, like Beyonce, yeah, Queen Bee, that like you could say the same thing with a lot of people. I think that maybe we've kind of like been more level-headed and gravitating away from celebrity worship culture in a way, and that's not necessarily indicative of like the quality of the art that they're creating or the quality of movies or the quality of the actor or the quality of the musician, right? Like I don't know. I agree with what he's saying in terms of like there's been a notable trend in how people worship celebrities, but like I don't know if that necessarily translates to that means that, you know, like stars are worse or like actors are worse or something, right?
And get people to go to the movie theater and see his latest film. You know, back when probably you and I were kids, the dominant forces at the box office were like, oh, I'm going to go and see the latest Arnold Schwarzenegger movie.
You know what? I kind of agree, but I think that this is a step in the right direction because I would rather have people seeing the new movie made by the director. And as we've seen recently, you know, people saw the new fucking Christopher Nolan movie, right? Like there's directors that have made themselves prominent enough to connect with people in a way where they know their name. And there's very few of them. Actors are the most obvious because they're the ones on the screen, and so many people would just be like, oh, I like Hugh Jackman, and they go see the new Hugh Jackman movie, right? I think that's a step in the right direction to not weigh so much in terms of actors, but think about more of directors, right? Like I think that people are growing in that sense where they realize that just because an actor is in a movie doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good. So I agree with this as being a trend in that direction where like just because an actor's in a movie doesn't mean it's going to sell. I think that's a good thing, personally.
We're going to see the latest Stallone movie, the latest Bruce Willis movie. All people like that, they were stars that could sell films just on their star power. We don't have that anymore.
And that's a fucking good thing, in my opinion.
And it's the same problem with...
I would okay, so here's my issue. So he's explained this as an issue that he has. He goes, you used to be able to sell movies on star power. Let me take a wild fucking guess and assume that by the end of this video, he's not going to explain why that's a bad thing. Because essentially what he's doing right here, which is the content that I've seen from him, is he's kind of appealing to this, like, the past was great, which, I mean, you know, I'm not saying that he has every belief that every conservative commentator that I've seen talk about things that are not movies. I'm not saying that they're all the same person, but it appeals to the same audience in the sense that, like, there's a lot of old people. There's a lot of people that are getting older. I'm fucking 32, right? Like, I'm getting older, you know? Like, I don't consider myself to be ancient, but a lot of things that people in my generation, millennials, are experiencing are based in nostalgia. They're based in, like, oh, you know, like, I have good memories of these things in the past. It's a very, like, easy thing to get, like, sucked into. It's a very easy thing to just uncritically just accept and want, right? But I think that there needs to be a bit more of an argument than just it was in the past and therefore it's good, right? There's
at the box office where all people like that, they were stars that could sell.
I want to hear him talk about why it's a bad thing that an actor doesn't draw box office numbers by being an actor alone. I want to hear him justify that. And I don't think he's going to do it by the end of this video. If he does, then I, you know, whatever. But, like, I've only ever heard people talk about that in the sense of this is something that doesn't happen anymore, and without explaining further, we're supposed to think that that inherently, because it doesn't happen anymore, is why it's bad, right? But I things change. Like, I'm sorry, like there's a lot of things that change, and I know change can be scary, but we all have, individually, societally, generationally, we all have kind of tests as to how we can accept change and how we can deal with change, how we can adapt to change, right? Like, adaptation is, you gotta adapt, like shit's gonna move on without you if you don't adapt, right? So you can't, I don't know. We'll see if he ever explains why that's bad, but I've never heard an argument for it, which is why I'm not expecting it.
Oh, films just on their star power. We don't have that anymore.
We don't have it anymore.
And it's the same problem with films in general. We don't want to take the risk now of inventing new things because, one, movies are massively expensive, and so they don't want to take the risk of investing $200-300 million on something that's completely unproven. And so all they'll do is say, well, what's a surefire hit? Well, I don't know. Star Wars used to be popular. Let's do that. Indiana Jones was popular.
I agree. I completely agree with what he's saying right now.
Do that. Let's just keep recycling the things that older people remember. And two, we don't.
I've criticized this exact same thing.
Have the talented writers with really interesting life experience.
Oh, I completely disagree. We do have the talented writers, and you, with your 2 million, almost 2 million fucking subscriber channel, are not promoting them. This is part of the issue that I have. I'm sorry. Like, if you were just like actively seeked out, like, there's so many people writing so many different things. There's so many people directing so many different things. Like, the type of media that you want to see exists. It's out there, and you would fucking love it. And all you would have to do is just like look for it, and you could use your platform on the internet to help promote it. Like, I want to see Charlie Kaufman get his fucking next project off the ground. I want to see it have money. Like, I want to be able to like promote whatever Kickstarter he has to do. Like, I want to see more films from the creators that I love. And man, like, it's what he's talking about, like what he wants to see doesn't exist. And it's frustrating. Like, oh man.
Experiences that they can translate into scripts. And so they don't have the ability to create new things that are really...
He just says, like, writers are bad now. Like, talent didn't disappear. Like, whatever you think is good writing from the 80s or whatever, like, it's not like people can't do that. Like, you're just not promoting the people who can, right? Surely, you got Russell Crowe on your channel. Surely, like, you have enough exposure and connections to be able to promote the people that can, right? Like, make a fucking movie studio or something. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm trying to do artistic projects. Like, my problem is time right now, and I'm trying to fix that. I would like to do like actual writing shit,
interesting and cool.
It seems like Mark
I'm trying to make steps towards doing that.
Hamill has almost been trying to publicly say that he don't like what the franchise has done to the character of Luke Skywalker, that he personally feels offended and affronted by it. Sometimes it seems to me that you're driven by a kind of a love of narrative and story, and almost like Joseph Campbell-like ideas of how a hero should function and what a story should do. I've got a few things I want to run by you. Like, I used to think, it's like a little hypothesis of mine, that American movie stars somehow embody how they regard, how that nation in particular, and let's face it, it's still the nation that defines our planet, like how it sees itself at a particular time. Like, when it was Schwarzenegger and Stallone, it was a kind of rebooted 1980s America with heft and
You realize Arnold Schwarzenegger is like not American, really. I mean, like he was the governor of Georgia eventually, but like he can't run for president. He wasn't born in America. He's got like an insanely Austrian accent, right?
And an overt masculinity. Adam Sandler, who I did a movie with actually, and who I think is a really interesting and brilliant performer and comic, and he like. At a time when we were starting to learn, for example, that there weren't actually weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, Adam Sandler had this kind of shucks, I didn't mean it, like kind of mentality that aligned neatly with an America that's trying its best and erring sometimes. Now, perhaps what we have is an
Man, it's so crazy. It's so a lot of the people that are doing like this weird, like every unexpected death is caused by the vaccine shit. You know, a lot of people that are doing this are like using the same sort of like feelings of like, okay, there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. You know, and it's like you're taking true things where it's like, okay, the government wasn't, you know, being honest with us at this particular point in time, and they're saying like, okay, therefore every single thing that has been approved by any sort of governmental agency is, you know, like bullshit. Like I don't know. People are so fucking weird. The vaccine is not safer than not getting the vaccine if COVID didn't exist. But with COVID existing and the fact that it's so contagious that everybody is going to get it, the vaccine is safer than getting COVID. It's so insane that people are like, oh yeah, like the the antibodies you get, it's better if you just get COVID. It's like, but what about what COVID does to your body? Right? Like I can't do this right now. It's so fucking, I can't believe how stupid the world got. COVID broke so many people's brains. COVID broke so many people's fucking brains. Like people got sucked into conspiracy nonsense within the time of, like, apparently it was just such a large world event that everybody was like looking for some reason to consider every part about it a conspiracy. You know, like there's some things where it's like, okay, yes, I can understand why you would believe this part about it or this part about it. But like the way that it's just so sucked into this like insane, like right-wing conspiratorial culture, like man, it's frustrating. It's frustrating. And then someone's going to look at me saying this and assume that I believe like X, Y, and Z and being like, oh, you're an NPC. You must believe this exactly and this exactly. It's like, you don't know my beliefs, right? I mean, you would if you watched my channel because I'm very public about my beliefs. But yeah, a lot of people misrepresent those.
America that doesn't know what it's trying to sell itself anymore, trying to present a kind of ethical and moral face to the world while clearly being backed by a commodity. As you say, the motivation behind these IPs and these franchise movies is no one's willing to take a risk. You know, Matt Damon says, like that, you know, you'd never get a Goodwill Hunting type movies no more because no one will back a $30 million movie like that. They need to have IP behind them. But what I want to get into just before, while we're still on YouTube.
I mean, fucking Tar got funded, but it didn't make any money. I don't, how much money did Tar cost? 10 million? What's the most expensive original IP that's been made in the past fucking like 10 years? Like, it sucks. I wish more original ideas got funded. Speaking of Tar, yeah, 25 million. Wow.
Before we leave YouTube, so do bear that.
That shouldn't have gotten that much money because it was, I mean, maybe after 30 years you can make it back because like it got a 4K Blu-ray. I'm going to be pimping it out and I'm going to be like talking about it and dissecting it. Beau is Afraid is not going to make that money back. Tar is gonna, for sure.
In Mind Drinker, that we're still in a place where censorship is possible is
over time.
How do we marry together the idea?
I'm sure. Okay, this is on Russell Brand's official channel. Let's ignore the fact that we don't even get enhanced bitrate 1080p. But listen to how shit the audio quality is. It's like 96 kilobits per second.
On YouTube before we leave YouTube, so do bear that
He's got the worst mic.
in mind, Drinker, that we're still in a place where censorship is possible. Is how do we marry together the idea that you don't want movies all to be big buff white movie stars? You want diversity. You want good, like as a father
This is a good question.
of daughters, I want good strong female character.
Oh, I love how he has to like caricature that with the quotes too.
I want strong female characters in movies, right? I do, for my girls. I want them to watch films and not always to be it's just guys and blokes, and you know, I want
Guys and blokes.
there to be diversity. But how do you marry that? What do you think is the concession that should be made to make
Oh, this is a great question. I can't believe he's asking him this.
movies more, for want of a better word, more diverse? Where do you stand on that, mate?
Well,
Mate?
Interesting points you've made there, because like when you talk about the stars of their different eras, like the 70s was like De Niro, Al Pacino, Dustin Hoffman, like the interesting character actors, you know.
I don't know if like saying those names is different than saying like Chris Pratt, you know, like Ryan Gosling. I don't know if that's that different. It's just because like we can look back at the 70s retrospectively and be like, yes, we know these names now because we're in the, like, is it really that different than just naming off like big name actors of today? Like that's so weird.
The 80s was the big buff muscle men. It was the time of like American confidence. We're gonna kick ass. We're gonna dominate. We're gonna do awesome.
We're gonna get this Austrian man to give us the American confidence.
90s, it moved into like more, ambiguous, like slightly more vulnerable heroes. The 2000s was very much reflective of the war on terror. So there was a lot of, military themed stuff. There was a lot of thrillers. There was a lot of secret agent things going on. And then, you look at now, there's nothing. I literally just said there ain't no movie stars.
I don't know if he knows what question he was asked, because I was very excited to hear him. So Russell Brand clearly asked, like, hey, I want to see more representation in films. You're calling out things in a way where it's like, okay, there's clearly some sort of agenda being pushed on people, and movies are bad now because there's no good characters and blah, 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 blah. What if it's better that it's not just buff white men as stars in movies, and I have 2 daughters and I want to see them represented in movies, and I want them to grow up and know that they're represented, and maybe it's not just white people. He's went on a giant tirade of just listing what was popular in each decade without having answered the question. Let's see if he does.
Because the country doesn't even know what it is now. It's in a conflict of identity. So I think it's a self-evident point of like it doesn't even know what it wants to be anymore. So that's kind of really sad to see, because we always, as a Brit, I always looked up to America as like the model of the world. Like, okay,
I thought that I was gonna watch this whole thing and not like come off too hard on Critical Drinker. Like, I'm pretty open to like other political perspectives and other, like, I don't believe in free will. I believe that like both of these people, all of you watching at home, are just people that are products of your environment, right? Like, I don't have any like ill will towards anybody. Like, like I'm pretty loosey goosey, easy going, right? He didn't answer the question.
This is the country that leads us, the free world. But yeah, when it comes to marrying what you talked about,
thank you, God.
Like the rather than just having straight white guys as like the movie stars, how do we include people of different genders, ethnicities, all that stuff? I guess what I would say, hey, we did it 20, 30, 40 years ago. We just didn't make such a big deal out of it like we have.
Oh man. Like, okay, I get it. Like, when what was it? Jennifer Lawrence who said this shit? They were like, I am the first female main character. Like, if you want to respond to stupid shit like that, yes, you know, bring up Ripley. Ripley from the Alien series. Like, everybody brings up Ripley. I get it. There are strong female characters. There are female directors who have been making movies for a while. There are, you know, female writers who have been writing movies for a while. You know, like, there has been representation of different genders, different races. There has been that technically, right? But it seems like a lot of people are taking issue with that being like a little bit more representative of the actual population in the slice of the pie, right? Where, like, yes, you can take examples from history and say, yes, this has happened. There are good examples of this. You know, it's not like this hasn't happened before. I completely agree. Whereas, like, the argument towards, like, oh, including a bit more representation is saying, you know, women are actually the majority of society, which I'm gonna have my, like, most fucking red-pilled fucking sexist based take here, and I'm gonna say, like, hey, you can't complain about anything politically if you're the majority vote, okay? So I'm gonna give one to the MRAs here, okay? Like, women are the majority vote, so you can't complain about anything that you vote on, right? Half serious. But, like, come on. I mean, it's what I'm saying here is there's a difference between something existing in the past and having, like, clear examples of it versus the conversation of taking an issue with it because it's happening more often, right? Let's see what he says.
Have to do now. And that's the thing that annoys people. That's the thing that turns people off. When you make the identity of the main character, the main actor, the sole focus of everything, people are just like, well, why are you making such a big deal of this? Why should I care about this? They used to just do it.
Okay, here's an interesting perspective. What if we were to say that although it is stupid if the identity of the main character or, you know, their inclusion in a film, and, you know, like, Disney goes like, this is the first gay character or whatever, or like, I'm a superhero that's a woman, and, like, this is why you should care about me. What if we agree that that's stupid, but we also say that that is essentially also something that has happened in the past with white men, but you just haven't noticed it? What if we say that that's stupid, but we also say that, like, there are movies that are, like, ridiculously white and ridiculously straight and ridiculously male in a way where, like, it parades that as an identity, but you haven't noticed it and you haven't criticized it? What if we say that both of those things are stupid? What if we say that both of those things are stupid?
Without having to make a big deal out of it. When we talk about the great female characters in cinema, we have characters like Ellen Ripley. She was an alien from the 70s.
It's funny that it's funny. I said Ripley before he did because it's like, it's like one of the like, there are so few that you know exactly which ones they're going to say. And this is like part of the argument, right? Like, is like, before he says anything, you can say Ripley, right? Like, you know, like, and it's not to say that Ripley's a bad character. I love Ripley. She's logical. She's, like, commanding and, like, confident, and like she's a great, like, what a great fucking character. I love Ripley. She's, like, something that I really love about the Alien franchise. But the fact that, like, you know, when people are having these conversations about, like, oh, you know, like, maybe there should be some more women in movies, and you're like, Ripley, like, it's the top of every Reddit thread. Like, it's a really basic bitch thing to say. Like, I'm sorry, like, it's like the most obvious thing. It's the most obvious thing, and, like, that's why I said it, is because, like, it's everybody said it, you know, like, that's a part of the conversation, you know.
That's before I was even born. They got this right.
Sexism is no more because Ripley is existing. You know, I have pretty nuanced takes on gender identity and, you know, like gender related issues. I think that like each gender has their own struggles, you know, like there's no like, oh, all men are bad or all women are bad. Like, you know, we're just people. Most people are shit. You know, if you have a bad experience with somebody, you know, if you have a bad experience with like the type of gender you're attracted to and you're not like socially involved with them all the time and your only interactions are your bad dates, then you might think all men are bad or you might think all women are bad. You know, like, turns out most people are just kind of shit. You know, it's not exactly gendered. Turns out most people are kind of shit. You know, surround yourself with good people. Surround yourself with people that you like. Surround yourself with people that get you, people that understand you, people that accept you, people that don't judge you, right? Surround yourself with those people. Don't think that like an entire gender is like bad. You know, I get it. Or an entire race, you know.
You've got Sarah Connor from the 80s. Again, fantastic.
Damn, did I mention both of those before he did?
Fantastic. Actually,
Is one of you in the comments mentioned Sarah Connor? I don't know if I said that out loud.
hero, fantastic.
It's like the most obvious. This is, oh man, like I'm trying not to be like a drama horse. I was gonna say llama, but I'm not. Like, it's there. I think there is some. I think that a lot of criticism against the critical drinker is overblown. I think that there's a lot of people that know that they want to hate him but can't articulate why, and can't really articulate why they don't like him. And I don't agree with that. I think there are legitimate criticisms to make against him. I don't think that he's like a bad person. I don't think he's a piece of shit. I think that he's a person just viewing media the way that he views media. And like, you know, whatever makes sense to him is going to make sense to him. You know, I don't think that it's coming from any sort of malicious perspective, but I'm going to say why I disagree at the very least.
Odd character, really interesting. You had Trinity from the Matrix from the 90s. Like, they got all this stuff right. They just didn't feel the need to make that the sole focus of these characters. They were interesting characters first and foremost, whether they were female, whether they were women, whether they were black, white, whatever, it didn't matter. That the main focus was that they were a well-written character. That's the difference. That's what we can't do now.
Okay, here's my question. Do you think that like part of the perception of them making that a big deal is to do with how people are reacting to it? Because I think from a marketing perspective, I think that they were thinking like pretty much the exact same things in terms of representation, in terms of like, you know, like Mulan, like they were trying to go for the Asian market. They were trying to go for, you know, there's definitely stories where they created female characters and intention of the writers was to be, hey, let's make a story with female characters to try and, you know, make a movie for the female market. And that's going to be our selling point. That's going to be our advertising point, right? It's not like that didn't exist in the 90s or the 80s or whenever you know, your idealist version of cinema is. It's that a lot of people didn't freak out about it as much, right? And so you look at like this weird backlash culture, and I think it's important not to mistake the amount of people criticizing it for the actual intent of the writers and the producers, right? Like, I think that existed in the 80s, in the 90s, like, etc. Like, for sure there were people in Hollywood and writers and directors that were trying to be representative of a culture. They were trying to be woke or whatever you want to call it, right? Like that, it's not like that didn't exist. That, like, this is such a weird thing to say, right? It's just there's more people talking about it in a not just critical way, but in a very narrowly critical way, where people are essentially like parroting a lot of other talking points, and people are essentially, you know, giving a lot of it's like a feedback loop. Is that the term I'm looking for? Like, I think that can cause people to believe that maybe it wasn't a thing that happened in the past, but like it's all there, right? Like if the movie Mulan was like a thing that got released today, everybody would be like, oh, so you're trying to make a movie with an Asian female character and she's playing a man and it's trans or whatever. Like, it has more to do with the reaction, right? Than, I mean, it was a thing that got remade today. Yeah, I know. But it has more to do with, like, in terms of, like, what you're trying to claim is the intent of the filmmakers. It's not like that wasn't present in other films. Like, you could argue that the films of the 80s, 70s, 90s, or whatever, any films that you loved that were, like, pro-America, I'm muscle, you know, like, I'm muscle, I'm gun, police, whatever, like, those are all equally politically and culturally and racially motivated in terms of like what the filmmakers decided was marketable, what they decided people wanted to see, right? Like, you could make the same arguments of like, oh, you're trying to represent this for political reasons. You could make those exact same arguments to the films that you love. Right? You could make those exact same arguments. Because a lot of films, especially in the 70s and 80s and 90s, were kind of propaganda. And that's not to say that they're bad movies, right? Like, a lot of these films were, you know, have you noticed like the trends of like what race the villains were? Have you noticed like when there's been a lot of conflict in American history with Russia, a lot of the villains would be Russians, right? Like, the Holy Mountain made like a pretty apt comparison metaphor about this, where, you know, they were talking about like creating a comic book where they indoctrinated children into consuming this comic book, and they were like, the government has decided that we want to wage war against Peru, and so we made the main villain the Peruvian monster. Like, all of the films that, you know, or a lot of that are from this generation of films that this guy loves, and a lot of people that make these same sort of media criticisms love, like, a lot of them have a lot of political propaganda in it, and a lot of like gender propaganda, a lot of race propaganda, a lot of like gender identity propaganda, and maybe we just didn't, you know, necessarily come to terms with what that was as it was happening, but like a lot of it exists, right? And maybe we're just more hyper aware of this conversation nowadays, but that doesn't mean that it's not a thing that existed before, and that this is some like new wave of like movies didn't used to be political. Like, I don't know if I agree with that, you know?
Yeah, it offends you because it's, in a sense, hasn't got any art or care in it. Trusting the character like Ripley from Alien or Sarah Connor from the Terminator movies.
It's always Ripley and Sarah Connor, like every single time. Every single time you talk about like female representation in a movie, it's always like, we got Ripley and Sarah Connor. And not to say that they're not good characters, but it's like, it's literally always those two examples, which kind of proves the point, right? Like, I don't know. It's not to say that every movie within that generation is like therefore bad because it didn't include female characters, right? It's just an argument that like, hey, you know, maybe there could be more characters like Ripley and Sarah Connor, you know, like maybe, you know, especially to people that really feel so emboldened by this sort of like, America was great because we had muscle people in the 80s. Like, in the same way that you might feel happy about yourself being represented in that way, you know, like there's other people that might see themselves represented in a different way that, you know, they might enjoy.
with, say, an example off the top of my head, which I know will go over well on these platforms, Captain Marvel. And the way that Captain Marvel was kind of presented as a hero, it offends you, I think, because as I've said before, I'm a fan of your content, that you don't get to see a vulnerable character evolve, a vulnerable character learn lessons, a character that is flawed and has to overcome obstacles. In a sense, this is the function of story that precedes the medium of cinema, that we need to see that a character in position A at the start of the film is unable to achieve something, but by, they go through catharsis, challenges, whatever, and at the other side, they're able. And you think that this new ideology that's about presenting figures or characters in a particular way is unable to serve story and the function of story? Is that what you're saying, Drinker?
What's the fundamental thing, like you said, that gets you to identify with a character is you give a person that's somewhat likable, give them an obstacle to overcome and have them struggle to do it. They have them lots of things that get in their way, like they fall down, they pick themselves up, they eventually overcome. That is the fundamental essence of what makes you like a character.
In a very specific type of movie that is very crowd pleasing, yes.
Identify with them. It's so easy. It shouldn't even.
It is not the rule for all films or characters.
Need to be said, but what they lack with these modern characters that they try to do is that they're not willing to take that step of have them fail and be vulnerable and have flaws and weaknesses. Either because the writers don't know how to do it, or because they've got this kind of prickly defensiveness when it comes to writing things like female characters, where they don't want them to be perceived as weak. And so the only alternative they have is, well, they just have to be great at everything. And so they're brilliant at everything right off the bat. They have all the skills they need. They don't need to learn everything. They don't really have personalities because they don't have any like flaws or weaknesses. And the arc basically becomes them being amazing and being up here, and the rest of the world having to learn to accept how awesome they are and like eventually come up and accept them. There's no character arc there. It's just a straight line. That's
What he's saying is not untrue. It's simplistic, but it's not untrue. I think that in general, like a lot of these, Marvel of the day films are just terribly written. And I do believe that, if we were to look at human beings as statistics, you will probably see a higher number of writers writing larger projects that are probably more scared to write flawed female characters because of how they'd be perceived, right? I get it. That's not an untrue thing to say. But it is, again, the takeaway as a whole is kind of like a very narrow view of filmmaking and cinema and just media diet in general, where it's like, it's not like this is like, it's not like you can't find movies with like good female characters in it or anything. It's not like you can't find well-written movies. It's just kind of like, oh, okay, like if you're only watching Marvel movies, then yeah, there's some issues with it because it's a Marvel movie, but not necessarily because of much more than that.
And people don't find that satisfying. That's the problem. That's why nobody watches these movies anymore. That's why the box office returns just go down and down.
Yeah, because when we meet, let's take the example of Sarah Connor. We find her as a waitress, drifting through life listlessly. But down the line, we see that, this character is going to be a revolutionary figure.
Sorry, which character?
Of Sarah Connor, we find her as a waitress, drifting through life listlessly. But
it's also kind of a horror movie where, like, okay, the two examples, Sarah Connor and Ellen Ripley, they're both sci-fi horror movies, right? Where they might not even be female leads if people didn't have this weird caveman brain protectionist mentality of like, gotta protect the babies and the women, right? Like, how many horror movies do you like? The final girl is a trope. The word girl is in there because, like, to make people scared you got to have it a woman because they're more innocent, because they're more defenseless, right? Like that's a part of the trope. That's a part of like the gendered sort of stereotype, right? And so when both of the examples are like Ripley sci-fi horror, right? Sarah Connor sci-fi horror. Thank you for the raid, Red Radius, right? Like they're great characters, but they're the exception to the rule when it comes to the genre. But they might not be females if it weren't like a horror sci-fi genre, a horror genre specifically. You know, when we're talking about characters like overcoming obstacles, I agree that that helps you empathize with them, especially in like a mainstream film. You know, like we're gonna go like watch a film like Drive, right? The guy barely speaks a fucking word, but you see him suffer a bit. You understand what he wants. You understand his goals. You understand what he cares about, and you understand what it means to him by the end of the film for him to achieve his goals. Those are important things if you're gonna make like a mainstream, like goal-oriented, like ABC plot sort of thing that appeals to a lot of people. I agree with that. But like I don't know if Ripley and Sarah Connor are necessarily like the prime examples of writing female characters when they're both just, you know, sci-fi strong women characters that were down on their luck mostly because there's like a thing trying to kill them. Like most of their hardship was the fact that they're in a horror movie, right? Like you write a character like Captain Marvel, it's not like you know, it's not like she's got like an alien or a Terminator trying to get her the whole time. It's not like it's a fucking horror movie, right? Like these are entirely different genres. So I'm not saying that Captain Marvel was well written. I'm not saying that Captain Marvel, like, it wasn't. It was not. But I'm sure there's examples of Marvel movies that had male characters that did not have as much struggle as like Captain Marvel or whatever, you know, female. Did Black Widow get her own movie? Like, maybe I'm full of shit because I've never watched every Marvel movie, but like, I'm willing to bet that there's some Marvel movie that exists where there's a male character that also didn't really go through much struggle or suffering before they were expected to be a hero. And just people don't talk about that. The Bride and... Oh, I love Kill Bill. I love Kill Bill. The Bride is a great example of like a, you know, strong female character, but it's also a dude movie. You know, it's also a dude movie. Like, and as a, you know, biological male person with a penis, whatever, like, I gotta accept that a lot of things that I love, you know, I love a lot of dude movies. I love some girl movies too. Like, you know, a lot of things are kind of different. A lot of things, you know, we're not all looking for the same thing. I love Kill Bill. I love Kill Bill so fucking much. I think that the Bride is a great character. You know, some people are looking for fucking, I don't know, Lady Bird. You know, it's not my thing, but you know, some people were really looking for that. I don't know. And it's not like a poorly written character because it's for girls, but you know, different people like different things. Yeah. I don't know where I was going with that. That was a little bit of a ramble.
But down the line, we see that, this character is going to be a revolutionary figure that's met the challenge of knowing that she's carrying perhaps the most sort of significant thing that a character could carry, like the, you know, the essence or a symbol for the future. Hey, listen, we're going to come off of YouTube now, and here are the reasons you should join us on Rumble. We're going to talk about Sound of Freedom. Why is this movie causing so much controversy as it appears to be beaten in the...
Okay, do I dare continue this on Rumble? Oh, the link is just to your channel? I can't even, like, give me the actual interview. How long ago was this? July 14th. All right, we're going July 14th.
met the challenge of
Can I watch Rumble videos on Twitch? It's as long as they're not banned streamers, yeah.
knowing that, hey, listen, we're going to come off of YouTube now, and here are the reasons you should join us on Rumble. We're going to talk about Sound of Freedom.
I host some of my content on Rumble, and I don't get paid shit. Their fucking ad split is so bad. Like, I'm looking for a good reason to, like, even pimp out Rumble at all. By the way, I started uploading my shit on Rumble way before it was, like, anti-vax conservative shit. It was just an alternative to YouTube. People were uploading cat videos, and I was like, yeah, I'll do that, and now I'm kind of stuck with it.
Why is this movie causing so much controversy as it appears to be beating Indiana Jones in the box office? What does it tell us about films?
Oh my god, they're talking about Sound of Freedom. I'm so hyped.
What does it tell us about new funding models? What does it tell us about the appetite of us?
This conversation is an hour long. When am I going to bed? What the fuck?
Movie audiences. I'm also going to start referring to the critical drinker by his actual human name, and I'm going to ask you to remove them aviators. Not yet, not while we're still on YouTube. They can't handle them piercing Scottish eyes of a colour. I can't even begin to conject until I've seen them. So if you're watching us on YouTube or anywhere else, click the link in the description. Join us over on Rumble. If you're on Rumble now, press the red button and join us on Locals. You get to see content live when we record it in the event that it's pre-recorded. You get meditations from me. You get to be a member of our community, and I would welcome you there. I'd love it. There's loads of great people in there. Look at old Barry John Fox simply expressing himself with an emoji, even as we speak. Zypher 2000. Speaking of our man Will Jordan there, we'll get the fucking sunglasses off, mate, and you're allowed to swear now significantly, so you can be your true.
He's got very Sargon of Akkad eyes. Actually.
Oh, I wasn't ready for them brown eyes. You're beautiful. You've seen right into my soul there, for God's sake. So he's saying, what did he say? You're going to get lost in his gaze, and that has happened. That has happened.
In his gaze? More like in his lesbians.
In almost every sense of the word gaze, in every possible spelling of that word. Okay, so, hey, Will, what do you think's happening around Sound of Freedom? What do they object to? Because I've heard, what it is Sound of Freedom. Because someone told me about it a little while ago. A friend of mine actually said, you've got to see this movie, and, asked me if I would support it, which I plan to do. But I've subsequently seen people say, it's connected to QAnon, and it's a conspiracy theory movie. But of course, the plot of the movie is about a former Homeland Security agent who's rescuing children from child sex trafficking. What's the issue with that, Will? Why is it caused such controversy?
I mean, honestly, you think it'd be a no-brainer. Like, I think we can all come to the same conclusion that children being sold into child sex trafficking is a terrible thing and should absolutely be stopped at any cost. And so a movie about trying, a main hero who's trying to prevent that and trying to rescue children from the most horrifying situations imaginable, wow, that should be the sort of thing that you should really have no qualms about supporting. And
you're saying that what a movie is about is something that you should have no qualms about supporting? That merely the subject matter is something that you should support? That's insane. That's insane. A movie's about child sex trafficking, therefore you should have no qualms about supporting it? Because what it's about, not about the filmmaking? You person talking about films?
the fact that so many people in the mainstream media are against this, wow, it really makes me question what their values are. I do not understand it at all.
Yeah, I don't, because look, we're all familiar now with like the Jeffrey Epstein.
You're parroting the shit. You're just parroting what other right-wing people are saying. This is such gigantic NPC shit. Oh my god. Like, holy fuck. Were you just like waiting for the cue? Oh my god. So I'm as an RM Brown subscriber who subscribes to his Patreon, I'm going to share a bit of his Patreon exclusive stuff, which I'm sure he can't be mad about because I saved his channel from extinction. And I'm going to share a small clip of it because I know that I was listening to this earlier today and I heard Charlie Kirk talk about how anybody that doesn't support the Sound of Freedom is a pedophile. And I just wanted to, I was looking for the clip of Charlie Kirk on his own and RM Brown found it. So I'm just playing this.
And to that we say,
CK Louis.
Their stances and beliefs. But this right here, what does this accomplish?
Charlie?
Where you're bashing a movie that 8 years ago, Patrick, 10 years ago, the country that we used to have 10 years ago, you'd be like,
this is an ad for RM Brown's Patreon, by the way, where he posts exclusive videos.
oh, cool film. Let's go bring our families. But now it instantly has to politicize things. And people say, oh, Charlie, why are we so divided?
What's the context? This is the movie that the Critical Drinker and Russell Brand are talking about. Okay, hold on. Oh my god. You guys don't even know. All right, before we even get into this, let's talk about this is so funny. I can't believe that I thought that I would be done this at some point tonight, but it looks like I'll be up for a bit. The Sound of Freedom, Conspiracy or Controversy. Let's see what I should find out here. Let's see what kind of clips. There, a lot of them are like Twitter clips, so I don't know if I can pull them. So essentially, we've got there's a bunch of videos of like weird. So The Sound of Freedom is a movie that was made by, God damn it, what's the director? Jim Caviezel's in it, and it's the reason why it's attached to QAnon is not necessarily because like, oh, you know, the subject matter is QAnon, but because a lot of people that are fed this whole like everyone in power is a pedophile sort of narrative are watching this movie, and also its marketing campaign is basically like, if you want to save kids, you got to watch this movie sort of thing, right? And it's based off of a true story where, you know, if you look into it, and I will be watching this film when it's on digital. I just didn't want to watch it in theaters because it's over 2 hours. Let's see. Yeah, essentially this guy, you know, is sort of, he's telling this story as this like, hey, I saved all these children sort of narrative, and like maybe he saved like a couple kids, but like a lot of it was really overblown and exaggerated, and he conflated like people being sex trafficked with like actual sex workers who were not being like coerced into what they're doing. And like he hired like a fucking like a psychic to try and like find out where like missing kids were, and like all this like weird shit where like he was essentially doing this as this weird like ego project to like make himself feel like he was doing something. And like even if he did like a little bit of good, like the weird kind of embellishment of like the story is not necessarily what the movie portrays it as. And I'll watch it and maybe I'll have a different perspective when I watch it. It doesn't matter. But like part of the problem, like this is the same issue I had with fucking Precious, right? My first review on this fucking channel where people were like, oh, it's a good movie because it's about a real issue. It's like, that doesn't mean it's a good movie. That doesn't mean it's a good movie. And which is weird because you'd expect the critical drinker to argue against the same sort of thing where it's like, oh, just because it's about a social issue, just because there's a woman in it, just because it's representing something, doesn't mean it's a good movie. That's what The Sound of Freedom is, right? Like, it seems like, I've seen the trailer, it looks like a boring ass, poorly directed movie that's way too long, and I'll watch it. Don't worry, I'll watch it. But the only reason that people are promoting it, you look at every single person promoting the movie, they're like, you have to see this because the mainstream media doesn't want you to know that children can be abducted, and everybody who doesn't like this movie is a pedophile. And I won't say anything about the artistic elements of the film. I have nothing to say about the writing or the directing or the acting or anything, but I'm going to tell you that it's about saving children. It's like, this is the same shit that you should be campaigning against. If you're against woke shit, this is the exact same shit you should be against. It's like political nonsense taking precedence over the actual artistry, right? Anyway, so this film, you know, gets some sort of campaign, you know, a bunch of QAnon conspiracy theorists, etc. Not saying that means it's a bad movie. I still have yet to watch it. That not saying, you know, all these caveats, blah, 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 blah. And everybody who experiences a mild inconvenience watching the film thinks that it's a grand conspiracy to stop them from watching the film, which is fucking insane.
So, don't know if any one of you have already been to see The Sound of Freedom, but my friends and I just walked out. Hi. And we are curious what your experiences were in the movie theater, because we pre-ordered our tickets, paid for them, they were claimed, got the link sent, and this is an AMC theater in Pineville, North Carolina. Some point today, the tickets got refunded to my friend and we couldn't figure out why. So we come anyways to the theater after dinner, and they're like, oh, well, we refunded all the tickets because there's no air conditioning in our theaters. Okay, whatever, we don't care. Are you still showing it? Yeah, you can still watch it. So we get to thinking, why did they not send out a notice in the email saying, hey, we refunded your tickets because there's no air conditioning? And we just are curious, why didn't they let us know? There was no one in that theater. There was us 4 and 4 other people, 8 people in the theater on a Friday night. There was air conditioning in the lobby. There was air conditioning in the hallways. There was air conditioning in the bathrooms, not the theaters.
Whoa. There's air conditioning, and it's not just one machine that works for the entire building. Anyway, so there's a lot of videos like this, some with greater inconveniences, some with lesser inconveniences. This is the one that I responded to. And I said on Twitter, like, does she not understand that AMC could just decide not to screen the movie in the first place if they didn't want people to see it? Which is also, eggs are a vegetable is another one of my tweets if you wanted to see it. Like, AMC could just not screen the movie if they didn't want you to see it. They could just not screen the movie. I watched WALL-E in theaters without air conditioning. Same experience that you're describing. It sucked. Right? That was an inconvenience there. There are fucking Oppenheimer is screening like 70 millimeter screenings. They're unable to in a lot of places, and they're just fucking up, like entirely fucking up. Look at like the Calgary screenings. What was it? Like the Winnipeg screenings. Like there's articles all about this shit, about like shit going wrong with Oppenheimer. There's no grand conspiracy to stop people watching Oppenheimer, right? And so all these people are like getting all fucking diped up on TikTok talking about how like, oh, they started our screening 10 minutes late. They didn't have air conditioning and they refunded it. Like literally a movie that like how many months ago? It was like 3 months ago. There was a movie called Inside with Willem Dafoe where like I bought a ticket and I showed up to the theater and they canceled the screening entirely because like apparently I was like the only person to buy a ticket. That's the second time that that's happened to me. As a person who watches a lot of movies, there's an insane amount of inconveniences that I've experienced. I'm a little drunk. There's an insane amount of inconveniences that I've experienced as a person that watches a lot of movies. You know, like I've had things canceled on me. I've had no air conditioning. I've had the film reel like fucking burn up in the middle of a movie, and I'm just saying like, oh, sorry, the movie's over. Like I've had the fire alarm go off in the middle of like when I was about to watch Old by M. Night Shyamalan. Like if you've seen enough movies, you've been inconvenienced in this way, but people are convinced that because of the subject of the movie, because they're like, the government doesn't want you to know that children can be abducted. They're like, anybody who doesn't talk positively about this movie is a pedophile, basically. And it's like, holy shit. Do you not understand like confirmation bias? Do you not understand like the weird biases that people can have in their brains of like feeding into certain types of information? Do you not like look up the satanic panic of the 1980s for a second? Like look up how people can be influenced in certain ways just based on what they want to believe or what they're predisposed to believe or what they believe is possible, right? We're all subject to this. It's a matter of just being critical enough. And if it's in your fucking name, the critical drinker, right? Like it's in your name. Like I would hope that you're critical enough of the information you're exposed to. And I'm trying not to attribute all of the shit that I've seen about what is this movie called? The Sound of Freedom. I'm trying not to attribute all the shit that I've seen or heard of about this to him. I'm trying to carefully not do this, but that's the little that's the little tidbit of catching up before I show you this RM Brown clip because it's very funny.
Right.
Because Rolling Stone politicizes things that should have widespread agreement unless you're a pedophile. Unless you
Whoa.
are a pedophile.
Jeez.
And I'm not suggesting this author is, but unless you are a pedophile, you should probably support Sound of Freedom.
Charlie, you're
Jeez, Charlie, easy, buddy.
Oh, guys, I love this matchup. Chuck.
Patty Bet David. I mean, two of the greatest YouTubers who have ever
Gayest generation ever is the
dead-eyed
title.
wandered onto a camera. Two of the biggest morons who have maybe ever lived, but we're on day 10.
This is my ad for the RM Brown program, by the way. I hope you appreciate it.
9 who cares about this about this stupid Jim Caviezel movie. And these whack job right-wing influencers have concluded that if you don't like this terrible movie, you're a pedophile. This unwatchable piece of garbage.
And even if someone's like in jail for embezzling money,
Yeah.
or like they even know the most vile scum are the pedophiles and
Oh, yeah.
traffickers.
Whoa.
So you think about it, like
Jeez,
you
Chuck.
make a really interesting point. Prisoners, but
Sure you
like
do.
even they are like, no.
yeah.
Like, okay, I might have, I don't know, shot up like a drive-by shooting or like robbed a bank.
Or rob the bank.
But
Don't mess with the kids.
no. And
Yup. Yeah.
So let me, the morality of a prison gang is clearer than the morality of Rolling Stone.
Yes. Brilliant. And I've
Isn't
heard
that
that.
it, Charlie?
I've heard that
You're right.
multiple times from people.
see Chuck's little bit. Hey, right, guys? Right? Okay, this is classic. This is classic vintage Chuck. Almost 250,000 people watched this clip, this 34-minute clip, in 6 days. These people watched this and they said, oh, that checks out. This kind of thinking checks out. Where Charlie Kirk is talking about this Rolling Stone article where they made fun of this terrible movie. This movie made by a con artist and a QAnon lunatic. They made fun of it, of course, because everybody's making fun of it. But these guys are saying this in the context of, why can't we just agree on one issue? You know, that child slavery is bad. Why can't we agree? They can't even agree on this. But of course, everyone agrees on that. Everyone except for, deeply disturbed, mentally ill people believe. We do. We agree on that. But what Chuck and these weird melting Florida lunatics are actually saying is, if you don't publicly say this movie is good, you're a child sex trafficker, bro. You support it. You're in support of it. Okay, of all the PBD, and this is
All right, we're done with that. So yeah, that was a funny Charlie Kirk clip that I could only access through RM Brown because I didn't know where to access it otherwise because I had heard that on RM Brown. But
story. It does appear that paedophilia is, let's say, more popular than I'd imagined it was as a young man, blessedly. But it's odd that a film like this,
I will watch The Sound of Freedom at some point.
where, as far as I can understand it, the only roots for saying that there's a connection to QAnon or conspiracy theories is that once maybe Jim Caviezel, am I saying his name right, the lead actor?
Yeah, Caviezel, I think it is.
Caviezel, he commented on that slightly wacky wardrobe manufacturing story where they were saying it was a front for paedophilia. He maybe commented on it. Maybe the lead actor commented on it. And I know it's funded by the same people that made The Chosen. Only the guy that played Jesus in that. The guy that played Jesus in The Chosen will body doubled for me, I think, in Ballers, an HBO show that I did. With Jesus is my body double. That's my new catchphrase, man. I'm taking that down. My stigmata. So, do you think, this is a question I want to put to you as an expert in movies, or at least an authority on movies. Do you think
You're an expert in movies, or at least an authority in movies.
that what actually, of course, there's the idea that, well, wow, is there something to hide around all this paedophile network stuff? Let me know in the comments, guys. I know that's a subject you got to get into. Or is it, or additionally, is it because of this is a funding model and a not necessarily distribution model, but a PR model that's bypassing a lot of the gatekeepers? They're going on podcasts, you're promoting it. Tim Pool, I've seen talking about it. But it doesn't seem to have to go through the, I don't know, green tomato, red tomato, fresh or whatever stuff. What do you think about that?
I mean, it's twofold, really. Like, first,
It's crazy because, like, the fact that they're supporting this, like, grassroots film, like, I would love to see them support indie movies in general. Like, it seems like they would get what they want if they were just aware of more indie movies.
first of all, the movie doesn't try to make any connections to some, ring that's like operating at the top levels of American society or anything like that. It's very much like this is stuff that's going on in Colombia, Mexico, that sort of thing. It's just a guy trying to rescue kids from a hostile situation, and that's really the limit of it. So it's not trying to make that connection at all, which is so weird that people seem to be getting so defensive about that. And two, it's a cheap.
Okay, well, what I described was not necessarily that the movie was trying to implicate top-level people as orchestrating the child abduction or pedophilia, but I know he's not arguing against me, but I'm just clarifying what I'm saying. But that necessarily isn't that political though? I mean, it is very political. This movie that he's promoting is very political. But yeah, The issues with the movie are coming with the unreliable narrator aspect. I'm getting more intoxicated as the night goes on, FYI.
Movie. Like, it was made for like well under $20 million. This isn't like an Indiana Jones job where it's like 300 million plus God knows how much on marketing and stuff. And so they don't have the budget to do TV commercials and all the fancy advertising that you can ask for. They do this grassroots stuff where they're just make themselves available to talk to podcasters and stuff, and sell the movie on its own merits. Imagine that. Imagine a movie that's
The movie on its own merits. Like, I'll watch it. Don't get me wrong. I have a tough time believing, based on the trailer and based on the movie that the bits that I've seen, like, I have a tough time believing that the movie based on its own merits is why people are like talking about it, right? It's very clearly politically based, right? People are like, oh, if you don't like the movie, you're a pedophile.
it's just actually good, and people watch it because, hey, it's actually a really rewarding experience, and it's tackling an important issue that we should learn more about. Imagine that. That's it's almost like,
okay, hold on. You're kind of contradicting yourself when you say it's actually good, but then you say it's actually an important issue, right?
on its own merits. Imagine that. Imagine a movie that's just actually good, and people watch it because, hey, it's actually a really rewarding experience, and it's tackling an important issue that we should learn more about.
Is that not exactly like what you were complaining about earlier when you're like, oh, it shouldn't be about like the race or gender of the character? Is that not like contradictory to the movie's own merits, in your opinion, when you say like it's an important issue that people should know about? Right? This is the exact same reason why I was critical against Precious. You know, I'm like, okay, it's like kind of a sloppy movie. It might be about like, oh, you know, like overweight, you know, impoverished, you know, black person, you know, struggling in society. She was sexually abused or whatever. Like, the subject matter isn't a reason to think the movie is good. Is this not exactly what you argue against in the rest of your videos, you know?
Imagine that. It's almost like that's foreign now to us.
Yeah, therefore it's an example, isn't it, of it's quite guerrilla and quite radical because it doesn't have to go through the processes that typically a movie would do. The amount, as you've described, that's typically spent on advertising. And, you know, you work in independent media, I work in independent media, and sometimes what I start to feel, and I wonder if you feel the same, is they're attacking the content. They don't agree with my ideology, but actually I'm starting to think what they don't agree with is us existing at all. There's more like an economic problem. Oh no, this is where people are going to spend advertising. Shit, we can't keep up with this. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, put it this way, like when I work here, making my videos that I do, it's me in my office at home. I got 0% overheads. You know, I spend $0 on anything. And so, but I get millions of views because people are interested to hear what I've got to say.
And that's, you know, this is kind of why I don't hate the critical drinker, is like, he's not funded by billionaires. He's literally just a guy that's expressing his own opinions on movies. He's expressing how he feels the industry is. And even though I might take a lot of disagreements with that and, you know, come out with a completely different perspective, it's not like he's fucking like being astroturfed, you know, like, say what you will about him appearing on Russell Brand, but like, I think it's interesting to understand why people gravitate towards this. I think that it's very important. If we are to make like, I shouldn't include. Olivia, make sure you get. Oh wait, you can't see the URL. Never mind, my webcam's in front of it. I was about to say block the URL so no one can see that video. I think it's important to understand why he has 1.77 million subscribers with less videos than me. He's very clearly connected with people. He's very clearly connected with like a large portion of the population. He's very clearly connected with some people in the industry, like Russell Crowe. He had an interview with Russell Crowe. That's nuts to me. The fact that he had an interview with Russell Crowe, right? I think that it's important not to just completely dismiss and be like, oh yeah, you know, like no one cares what you have to say. Like, try to understand what he has to say. Try to understand what he has to say. Like, engage with it. I disagree with a good amount of it. I agree with some of it. I don't think that he's completely wrong in everything that he says, but like, you know, I think that there's a bit of nuance that he's missing.
And that's the thing that they hate, where you've got like...
But I'm also a person that consumes art movies and goes to film festivals where he just kind of watches Marvel movies and Indiana Jones and Jurassic Park and occasionally something like The Whale.
News networks, and you've got studios with like dozens, if not hundreds, of employees. They've got huge expenses that they go to, and they get like a fraction of the viewership that people like us get because people just don't care about them anymore because they know how fake they are. I've heard it said before. Like, it was a very smart man named Robert Meyer Burnett who said the currency of our current age is authenticity, and it's so fucking true. People care about presenters, whoever it is, who care about the subject matter they're talking about, who actually are authentic. They might not be as polished, they might not have the big production.
I understand someone who's as angry as him at the current state of media, and I think about people that watch Russell Brand. I think about that, you know, my friend's sister whose boyfriend watches him. I think about that sort of person. But I don't understand, like, making your career based off of, like, the media that you're watching if you're that person. I don't understand that part because it seems like you must inherently have like a very limited perspective on media.
Values, it doesn't matter. They're talking about things that they care about and that they're invested in. That's what people want, honesty.
Yeah, in a sense, that's.
It seems like inherently you must have like an interest that suits you more, right? Like something more that you might want to do in your life other than movies.
Power, isn't it, Will? Like, whether he's talking about mixed martial arts or whether he's talking about politics or psychedelics or hunting or diet or supplements or whatever, you get the impression, because in my opinion, it's true, that he's saying what he believes and he's saying what he cares about. And that seems sufficient to stand up against, you know, clear attempts to take him out around the ivermectin horse paste time, which again, similarly, like, I reckon.
Did he say horse paste?
To stand up against, you know, clear attempts to take him out around the ivermectin horse paste time, which again, similarly, like, I reckon as well, they just don't want that. You know, Carlin famously, George Carlin says it's like you know, you don't need conspiracy where interests naturally converge. And the mainstream media don't want powerful, independent voices that are able to just bypass their models. Because like you say, you've got zero overhead, you can operate on your own. And plainly, you're in a position where if you like a movie, you say you do. And if you don't like a movie, you say that even more.
And yet you're using your platform to recommend Free Guy. Like, fuck. Like, damn, I wish that I saw someone as critical of mainstream media where, like, your videos, let's see if I can search the word recommends. Sound of Freedom, The Menu, The Whale, Boiling Point, Everything Everywhere All at Once, The Expanse, Ford v Ferrari, All Quiet on the Western Front, Arcane, 1917, Event Horizon, Dread, Fight Club, Blade Runner, Top Gun Maverick, Predator, Jaws, Invincible, Falling Down. Like, oh man, like, you have 2 million subscribers. I can't be that upset at somebody like that just doesn't have the same peripheral, the same purview. Like, I don't know. It just seems like everything that you've ever recommended is something that, like, you have, like, inherently to have known about it, someone has to have thrown it at you rather than you discovering it. And I think that that's a waste of a platform with almost 2 million subscribers, right? I don't know. I'm trying not to be, like, super pretentious about this, but, like, if you care about film, if you care about art, right? Like showcase some people, like, introduce people to new artists. I'm not saying that those aren't good films, Night of the World. I'm not saying that there aren't good films within what he recommended there. I'm saying that they're all just films that you can't possibly have known about without them being thrown at you is the problem. Like, what is the purpose of being a film recommender, right? Like, I'm pissed at myself for being so far behind on my yearly list reviews. Like, I feel like that's part of where I shine. I'm trying to reorganize myself in a way where, like, I can continue doing 2016, 2017, all those things. Like, I got to cut back on how many things I include in a year. My biggest problem is, you know, like, I started including, like, miniseries and shit like that. Like, don't worry, it'll come. I've been figuring it out. But, like, I find a lot of value in, like, introducing people to things that they wouldn't have heard about without me, whereas I don't know if such a thing exists on this guy's channel. and I'm not trying to feel like, oh, I'm such a better person because my film taste is more unique or abstract, you know, like I don't know. I just feel like if you're touting yourself as like, I know what types of things that people should be watching, if you're touting yourself as like, mainstream things are bad and I know what people should be doing, like I would kind of expect that you would like, you know, 2 million subscribers almost. I would kind of like hope that you're introducing people to new things and not just saying like the menu, you know, like just things that like everybody already knows about. Like I don't know. Maybe this is a weird criticism, but yeah.
Well, and nobody pays me to do this as such. Like, I don't have relationships with studios that I can damage by slagging off their movie, and that's the thing. I can just be honest about it. But I always try to be fair. That's what I always want to be. I don't want to just hate on a movie because like it's made by a director I don't like. Whatever. Be fair. That's all I expect from what I do. And hopefully people understand that, and that's why they watch my videos, because I'll give an honest opinion about things.
In the Indiana Jones one, you listed movies where you were wrong. You sort of said like I thought Dungeons and Dragons wouldn't be any good, and you were wrong about that. And I feel like even some of the Disney TV shows, you've sort of gone, oh, actually that's pretty good, and so you've like I guess to your point about authenticity being the currency, and in fact this is a broader point we find.
He didn't think Dungeons and Dragons would be good, and then he enjoyed it. But the problem is like, he's still only seeing movies like Dungeons and Dragons, right?
As I continue making on our channels, you need principles. If you have a principle, then sometimes that principle is going to cost you. Sometimes
he doesn't really have a healthy media diet.
It's going to support you, but it remains consistent. When you're just like, oh, when I'm talking about this, when here's an example from the news this week. When cluster bombs are being used by Russia, they're bad. When cluster bombs are being used by America, they're good. Or Ukraine, sorry, via America. So
interesting take.
that means, that is the opposite of what you're discussing in terms of sort of veracity. And
when you're defending yourself, it's not different than when you're attacking another country. Those are the same thing.
Ability to trust.
Yeah, humane cluster bombs. I like that idea. But yeah, I mean, it's like, I sometimes I'll watch the trailer for a movie, I'll give my thoughts on it, and like make some predictions about what the film's going to be like. Sometimes I'm right, or most of the time I am, but sometimes I'm wrong. And like, I'm happy to admit that. If a movie, I go and watch it and it's better than I expected, I'm a happy man because I got to watch a good movie. So that's okay as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, for me, there's nothing wrong with admitting that occasionally you call it wrong. That's cool.
Well, I mean, again, this is the problem. My subjective, anecdotal experience with the critical drinker is like, people that would otherwise not be subscribed to any channel that talks about movies if it wasn't for them talking about like, oh, things are bad now. Things are bad now because the people are trying to make you be a thing.
Okay, as long as you're honest with people, I think that's all they want.
What about, do you sometimes get a bit, let's say, supercharged by the, like, if something isn't, for want of a better term, woke, do you think, oh my God, do you think it almost gets an extra bit of juice because of that? I'm talking about films like maybe, Maverick or the Mario Brothers movie, just...
I love the anti-woke crowd gravitating towards the Mario Brothers movie. That was so funny. I love that shit. It's a thing, and I don't know why. They're like, Mario Brothers being successful is a stab against the woke mob.
By virtue of the fact that it's not pushing that message? Or do you think that by not having the kind of the sort of gravitation...
Even though, I mean, Luigi was captured for most of the movie and Princess Peach wasn't, and she was helping Mario, like, you could say that that's just as woke. You could say that that's a very feminist movie, honestly, the Mario Brothers movie, but it seems to have split a lot of conservative commentators because it was successful, and they're like, oh yeah, this was successful because it wasn't woke.
Lag that wokeness can apply because it prevents, to use but one example, a character from having a meaningful arc because they're already presented as perfect on the basis of identity, which shouldn't be what's presented at the center of a film. And if it's freed of that, it's a little bit better. Or do you think that you're sort of like, oh, thank God, bloody Mario Brothers isn't doing that, and you get a bit excited?
There's the initial emotional reaction of like, hey, wow, this movie doesn't fucking hate me because I'm like a straight white man. That's nice.
Oh my God, like it... Do you feel like that's every movie you criticize? Like it hates you because you're a straight white man? Like, Jesus Christ. I understand and agree with a lot of the points that you make in terms of like, damn, like a lot of these new writers sucks. They should be taking more risks. Like the studio should be funding new ideas instead of gravitating towards old IPs. But like, saying that it hates you for being a straight white man, like, you could be, imagine yourself as a black person who is not a male. Imagine yourself as a black woman in the 1980s. Would you feel justified with your same perspective on media as you have right now? Would you feel justified in feeling like every movie that you watched was someone saying that they hated you for being a black woman? Because if everything that you watch right now is like you feel as though like they hate you because you're a white man, like how do you, like honestly, like today's media landscape, sure, there's a lot of bullshit, there's a lot of nonsense, there's a lot of like, hey, member berries, and there's a lot of people that aren't talented working on movies that shouldn't be, but to say that like the media landscape is like, oh, I watch a movie and I feel like I'm hated for being a white male, like it's kind of like an exaggerated sort of reactionary feeling towards just seeing more inclusivity or more representation, like the same kind of shit that Russell Brand was talking about, like, I don't know, 20 minutes ago or whatever in the podcast. Like, he was saying he has 2 daughters. He was saying he doesn't want to see like every single main character being a white man. He was asking you a genuine question of like, how do you reconcile with the fact that like maybe there are people that want to see more of this type of person? Like, I don't know. I don't know. I can understand that there are some examples of films that you have where it might be like, okay, this specific scene, it's like, okay, this person like writing this obviously hates white people, obviously hates men. But to act as though that's the media landscape right now, to act, it doesn't speak towards media. It speaks towards your media diet. You are not making statements about the film industry. You are making statements about the types of films you consume specifically. And that's my biggest issue.
It is perfect on the basis of identity, which shouldn't be what's presented at the center of a film. And if it's freed of that, it's a little bit better. Or do you think that you're sort of like, oh, thank God, bloody Mario Brothers isn't doing that, and you get a bit excited?
There's the initial emotional reaction of like, hey, wow, this movie doesn't fucking hate me because I'm like a straight white man. That's nice. Like that's a change of pace. But you know,
a change of pace, like it's the norm. It's when you say it's the change of pace for the Mario Brothers movie to not hate you because you're a straight white man, that doesn't speak towards film culture or films. That speaks towards the types of films you consume specifically and your experience with those films. That's an insane thing to say.
you try to be you try to break the movie down like into its component parts and say, well, okay, this one I enjoyed. Why did I enjoy it? Like, was the plot good? Were the characters good? Whatever. So you try to be a bit more objective about it. But it's also possible. This is an interesting discussion about. It's possible for something to be woke by the normal standards, but also be good if it's well written. The example that I've given before is a TV show called Arcane, which puts forward
This is very interesting, and I agree.
a lot of what we would consider to be woke politics, like a extremely diverse cast.
Not that I finished Arcane. I found it very boring, but
gay relationships front and center, a class struggle.
Oh God, it's woke because there's gay relationships in it. God damn, holy shit!
The heart of the plot that's driving it forwards. Very strong female characters, all that stuff.
It's woke because there's gay relationships and strong female characters. Holy fucking Christ!
That might be considered woke in other movies because it's badly handled, but it's extremely well integrated into a really good story in that TV show. And so,
okay, well, you contradicted what you said. You said it's woke, but it's still good, and then 10 seconds later, you said it might be considered woke in other movies, but it's not in this. Like, what do you?
Be considered woke in other movies because it's badly handled, but it's extremely well integrated into a really good story.
So it's not woke if it's well integrated, but you just said it was woke, but still good.
That TV show. And so I was happy to say, hey, this is an example of, say, progressive politics or progressive ideology done well. It can be done, but you've just got to write it well. That's what we look for, a good story.
Right, don't use it instead of structure. I suppose another film like The
Yeah, I agree. Don't use it instead of structure. I agree in the sense that if you are pushing a political agenda, it doesn't matter whether you're left or right. Like, if that replaces your characters, if that replaces your script, I agree with a lot of, like, the sentiment of what is being said in a a principled way. But for the critical drinker to be like, oh yeah, Sound of Freedom, and like, I'm gonna watch it. Don't worry, I'm gonna watch it. But like, I don't know. That's a little bit. It seems like a bit of a contradiction there. I'll watch it. We'll see what I feel about it when I watch it. But
Matrix is a good example. I'm talking about the first one, obviously, of how sort of different ideals and identity transcendent of homogeneity and heterodoxy is presented as aspirational and cool. And then the Wachowskis, of course, Wachowskis. I can't remember their name anymore. Like they had a sort of obviously
the Wachowskis
agenda during the trajectory of those movies. Like that, maybe that's something for you to touch upon. But I also like, again, with my personal position as a father of girls and also as a person that I believe there should be stories for everyone. There should be stories for everyone. But I think I agree with you as an aesthete or as a critical thinker, to sort of use the phrase from which your name is derived. Like, I want things to reward me and to make sense, I suppose. So would you touch on sort of the Matrix and the Wachowskis, or if I'm saying the name right, and also what films would I direct my girls to? Because I don't even like it. Sometimes if I watch an old Simpsons and Bart goes, girls are shit, or whatever, I'm like, oh, I don't want my daughter's watching that. You know what I mean? So,
oh my God. I love that Russell Brand is like actually trying to like get him to answer the real questions here. I'm like actually very impressed with Russell Brand here, because he's very much saying like, hey, my girls are growing up and like all this old media is not really reflecting like their experience. And so he's like, this is the second time he's asked him this question. He didn't really answer it the first time. So this is fucking fascinating, and we're going to see if he is able to answer it the second time.
So touch on that sort of side of it as well, if you could.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like, if you're looking for movies with good female role models, like, damn, like, where do I begin?
Oh, are you going to say, oh, wait. Let's just assume that he's going to say Ripley and Sarah Connor again. Let's see if he says anything else.
Yeah, like you've got the Terminator movies, I suppose, like we mentioned before. You've got Ripley from the first. Two Aliens films. You've got Marion from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Okay, we got one more. The first two were the first two that I said, though. Oh my God, we got one more.
Ark. You've got Trinity from the Matrix. You've got
okay, we got Matrix.
Davis from Long Kiss Goodnight. Like all these are very interesting characters that kind of, they got flaws, they got weaknesses, they got problems along the way, but like they overcome those things. So yeah, like there's been movies.
I don't man. I don't know if I like. Okay, so Sarah Connor and Ripley are very much like the go-to for this question, right? Like, cause they're sci-fi horror women characters that are main characters because it's a horror movie mostly, right? I don't know if I agree that like Trinity from the Matrix is a great female character. Like, I don't know if I agree that much. It was written by women, right? It was written by trans women. It's considered to be like a trans allegory or whatever we're gonna call it. Maybe retrospectively, maybe not. I don't know. But I don't even know if I agree that like Trinity is like that great. Like she literally just she's in the story to be like, oh, I love you. I'm gonna kiss you to like bring you back to life. Like that's most of her purpose. That's most of her. I don't know if I even if I'm to say like, oh yeah, females wrote this film. It's like a great female powered film and a trans allegory. I'm not sure if I even agree that Trinity is like a great woman character in any sense. Like she's really kind of she's just a side character that's there to prop up the main male character, right? Like a lot of the examples that he's giving that aren't Ripley and Sarah Connor are literally just like, I don't know, side characters. Like I agree as a response to Jennifer Lawrence saying, I'm the first female superhero. I agree that that's cringe. And yes, we're gonna give the examples of Sarah Connor. We're gonna give the examples of Ripley. They're great female heroes. They're great female characters. They exist. But if you're answering the question of not have there been female good characters that have existed, but you're answering the question of, hey, maybe we should see more female characters at some point in time. And you're like, oh, there have been plenty of. That's an insane thing to say, right? Like, it depends on what question you're being asked, right?
All throughout cinematic history that have given us this stuff.
Thanks,
It's just,
sunflowers.
Really, in recent years, in trying to highlight this stuff and in trying to correct a problem that didn't really exist in the first place, they've made it infinitely.
It didn't exist they tried to correct a problem that didn't exist in the first place. Like, I get it. I understand your perspective. I understand it. But like, man, it's not that like women existing and being more represented in media, it's not an attack on men. It's not an attack on men. And even though some people write it to be as an attack on men, and even though some writers, it's clear like, oh, like this person just had a bad experience with men and they think that like, oh, all men are evil because they had 3 dates with men and they were all shit or whatever. Like, those people exist and those people write movies, but like seeing more women in movies is not like this. It's not to claim that like this is not a thing that anyone should be concerned about. If I were a woman, I would see myself represented all the time. Name 5 movies in the past 20 years, 3 of which are side characters. Like, if I were a woman growing up in the 1990s, if I was a woman aged 1 in 1991, I would just watch Alien with Ripley. I would just watch the Terminator movie with Sarah Connor, and I would see myself represented. Like, okay, I get it. Like, it doesn't have to matter this much to every single person. I'm a fucking gay furry. I don't see myself represented anywhere. I'm the pioneer of seeing myself represented places. I'm doing that shit for other people. I get it, right? But to claim that, like, oh, the people that want to see themselves represented in that way, like, oh yeah, they already had it with Ripley and Sarah Connor, and that's it, and those are the only examples that you're ever gonna name, and then some side characters. Like, you gotta understand at least where they're coming from. Even if you think that that's something that they shouldn't like be concerned about, you should at least say that on their terms, right? You should at least say that on their terms. But you're acting as if like they don't even have an argument, which is like crazy.
Worse. That's the problem.
What about that analytic tool? Like, I only know because I saw it in Rick and Morty, where they say like an analysis of a movie from a feminist perspective is: are there 2 female characters that have names that are talking about something other than a man?
Bechdel test fucking sucks. Bechdel test is bullshit. I don't even think women talking passes the Bechdel test. The entire movie, they're talking to a dude. And they're talking about what other dudes have done to them, so it doesn't even pass the Bechdel test. Bechdel test is a bunch of bullshit. Discard that shit immediately, even if you're a feminist.
And also, like, there is an imbalance between films that, don't you think? Do you agree? Like, that are sort of built around, like, let's call them, white males or whatever. Do you think there's an imbalance that could be addressed? And what do you think about, like, why is it a critique like that emerged? Like the one that I learned on Rick and Morty that's got a proper name. Someone told me in the post it's a proper technique. It's called the something test.
Yeah, the Bechdel test.
It's
funny because the Bechdel test was actually created as a bit of a joke. But yeah, it's somehow.
Is it a 4chan thing or something?
No, it's a.
I love how Russell Brand thinks that the best. He thinks that the Bechdel test could have been created by 4chan. I love that. That's so good. Russell Brand. The Bechdel test was created before he was an actor, right? Before he was even like popular in movies in 2008 or whatever, right? Why does he think it was a 4chan thing? That's so funny.
It was created by a woman, but she just did it as a bit of a laugh, and it was meant to poke fun at like the feminist critique of movies and stuff. So it was never meant to be taken seriously, but it's become like the benchmark across the industry for like how movies are rated. And so, okay, it's a meme that became reality, I suppose.
Critical doesn't seem to even mention animated characters as well, like Milan from 1998 or Mitoko Kusanagi from Ghost in the Shell.
In terms of how do you square that up? I suppose part of the reason is like it depends what genre of movie you want to look at and how mainstream you want to go, because the biggest movies at the box office tend to be action movies, they tend to be superhero movies, all those kind of things, but they're generally very male-oriented movies, and so the natural result is you tend to get a man in the lead because that's what guys look for. But
I agree.
For other stuff, it's just you just have to go into different genres. It could be dramas, it could be romance, it could be historical epics, whatever you want to be. There's plenty of movies with characters like that in it. They're just not the big blockbusters.
Get it? Hey, I get it. Because what it is it's not like, hey, we really love white men. It's economic. It's economic. These movies will sell well.
I agree to a certain extent, in the same way that I said earlier, like, you know, I was kind of being a bit facetious, like, women are the majority population. You know, I said anything political you can't complain about because you're voting on it. I don't mean that to a literal degree, but, like, you can't complain about, like, women not being in politics if you don't vote for women in politics. Like, you're the majority vote. You're the majority vote, like, vote for more women. If every woman voted for women, then you'd have women in politics. Like, why? Honestly, why are there mostly men in politics? Why? Women are the majority population. You have the majority vote. It is a slight majority. I literally don't get it. You can't blame men for that shit. You got to blame women for that shit. Because women are the majority vote. Like, I don't know. Maybe this will get me canceled or some shit. I don't know, but I'm trying to reconcile with the statistics of it all, you know? Like, I'm trying to reconcile with the population. But to some degree, you have to, like, you know, blame what is popular on what is being consumed, right? So if there's, you know, a certain amount of things being represented in media, you have to blame who is consuming the media. In the same way, and I'm going to make an argument against the critical drinker here, in the same way that we saw mostly male, white-dominated films in the 80s, in the same way that we are now seeing a bit more representation, we are seeing a bit more less white, less male represented leads in films, and they're doing successful. Fucking Parasite was hugely successful. Everything Everywhere All at Once was an indie film, basically. A24 small production film, you know, maybe not technically indie. But, like, you know, it wasn't like a big, gigantic studio movie like Christopher Nolan, Warner Brothers, whatever. Like, everybody fucking saw it. Like, everybody fucking saw it. Like, if you didn't, like, what are you even doing talking about movies or even listening to me talking about movies, right? The landscape is changing, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And so you look at films like, you know, I think that, you know, you see Mahler, like, in the background here. And Mahler has had the critical drinker on his podcast, and I think they relate to each other a lot in certain ways. I think that people treat Mahler as kind of like this weird, like, kind of boogeyman where, like, sure, maybe he agrees with the critical drinker on some things. Maybe he agrees with me on certain things. Like, I don't think that he's necessarily like this caricature of like everything that's wrong with like film criticism or like objectivism or like, I think that a lot of people like treat him as like this weird kind of boogeyman, right? You look at his perspectives on films, like he loved Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like there are films that break out that like connect with everybody, regardless of like who the race or gender of the main character is, because it's, you know, a great film that connects with people. And I can understand, you know, like being in that perspective or being the critical drinker, you know, like you're used to this type of thing that has been presented to you your entire life, and you're looking for a reason to justify and understand why you don't like this new type of thing. And the reason isn't just, oh, you're racist or you're sexist. It could just be it's new, right? Like that's most old people. That's most people that just grow old. You know, like you're young and then you're old and you don't like things that are new. And that's like the definition of conservatism. That's the definition of just being somebody who's not progressive, is like, hey, things were the way I wanted them to be, and I think that that was safe, and I don't like things that are changing, even though that's progress, right?
Well, that's all. They don't care. They don't care at all. Like the Bud Light thing. They don't care if you're blue collar. They don't care if you're trans. They don't give a shit. They just want to sell you Bud Light. So it's the same thing with movies. And so maybe this is what perhaps this is a question. Like maybe what offends you is like they still want their cake of Indiana Jones, Luke Skywalker, a powerful IP from the 80s or 90s, but they also want to sort of attack. Oh, you shouldn't have these figures as the dominant figures. So they sort of live out their own dilemma almost in the movie of attacking and deconstructing the archetypes that they resent but rely on. Is that a good bit of made-up analysis?
What they want to do is use them as a springboard to launch their own new characters. But it's like trying to take a character that you've bonded with over a period of years, if not decades. Like
I agree that it's kind of lame to try and take these, like, you know, in Indiana Jones 4, they were trying to like be like, oh, Shia LaBeouf is the new guy, and then he got canceled, and then they were like, he actually died in the next movie. We have like Bill and Ted being like the two girls. I guess one of them's non-binary. I didn't know when I made my review. I don't know. You know, you have the two main characters from that one. And it was like, oh, we're continuing the franchise. Did they even have another movie planned? Like, I don't fucking know. Like, there's like a bit of a trend to be like, oh, we're passing the torch. I get that. I get understanding that, and I get recognizing that. But let's see where he goes with that.
grew up with and stuff, like Indiana Jones being a great example, or Luke Skywalker, for example, characters that you've really come to know and love. And then what they'll do is present them as old men who are sad and lonely. They've given up on life. They are broken down and they're kind of pathetic now. And they...
What do you want the main actors to do? What, like, do you want Harrison Ford to be like, oh, I'm such a very young, energetic young man? Like, what do you mean? What are you expecting?
Use that as an excuse to say, hey, they were never that good in the first place. And then what they'll do is they'll...
What? When was this published? This was after the new Indiana Jones, right? You mentioned that, right? Let's see. Yeah, that was a release June 30th. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, I don't think that the new Indiana Jones movie or like a lot of these movies were saying these characters were never that good in the first place. Like, you're reaching super hard when you say that.
Bring in a new diverse female replacement who is stronger than them, smarter than them, more capable than them, doesn't have any of their weaknesses. And it's like they're trying to...
Okay, he's coming at this from a very Star Wars-based perspective, which I'm sorry. People who really care about film and people who really care about diversity of film, not diversity of races or genders, but diversity of like film, like the actual, you know, film diet that you could consume. Most people aren't thinking about Star Wars, but it's clear that you're just thinking about Star Wars, right? Like, what you're describing is Star Wars. It's one movie. It's one movie.
Say, hey, see this guy that you really liked?
You're talking about Luke Skywalker. What other movie could you possibly be talking about right now?
Well, we've got a new and improved version here, so you have to like them even more now. Of course you do, because that's how
You're talking about Luke Sky. What other movie could you possibly be talking about where it's like, oh yeah, we've created a new female character, and not only have we replaced them with a female, but we're going to say that the old male version is bad. What other movie could you possibly... Can I get some suggestions in the chat? I don't want to just be like talking out my ass from my limited perspective of like me watching art house movies, you know, and like me watching some Marvel movies and some Star Wars movies. Like, he's talking about this as if this is like mainstream, this is what every movie is doing, and he's literally just talking about Star Wars, right? Is this not what's happening? Like, he's literally only talking about Star Wars here and he's not saying it?
Attacking and deconstructing the archetypes that they resent but rely on. Is that a good bit of made-up analysis?
What they want to do is use
please,
them as a
somebody
springboard
prove me
to launch their
wrong.
own new characters. But it's like trying to take a character that you've bonded with over a period of years, if not decades, like you grew up with and stuff, like Indiana Jones being a great example, or Luke Skywalker, for example. Characters that you've really come to know and love.
He says, for example,
present them as old...
But he's only talking about that, right?
Men who are sad and lonely. They've given up on life. They are broken down and they're kind of pathetic now. And they use that as an excuse to say, hey, they were never that good in the first place. And then what they'll do is they'll bring in a new diverse female replacement who is stronger than them, smarter than them, more capable than them, doesn't have any of their weaknesses. And it's like they're trying to say, hey, see this guy that you really liked? Well, we've got a new and improved version here, so you have to like them even more now.
You say Luke Skywalker as an example. What's any other example?
Of course you do, because that's how human emotions work. No, it's not. People don't think that way. And so the more you try and slot these like fake pod people replacements in to like supplement these classic characters that we loved, the more people reject it. And that's why Indiana Jones is fucking tanking at the box office.
Did Indiana Jones do that? Like, it kept the same main character. It didn't replace it with a female character and say Indiana Jones is bad. You literally had this entire tirade saying like, hey, they're trying to do this thing where like they're replacing it with women characters and saying that the male characters are bad. This is why Indiana Jones is tanking at the box office. Indiana Jones didn't do that.
This movie cost $300 million to make. It needs to make like $900 million just to break even. It ain't going to get to $500 million.
Wow.
No way.
There's a really funny...
She-Hulk? That's a very funny example. I didn't watch that show.
like this line from Seinfeld reminds me of you. There's an episode of Seinfeld where his dentist converts to Judaism.
That's very much a spin-off made for a streaming service.
Seinfeld offers...
I'm not going to argue that that's a good show. I've never seen it. It looks like shit.
So that it affords him to make Jewish jokes. And Seinfeld's rabbi says to Seinfeld, and does this offend you as a Jew? And he says, no, it offends me as a comedian. Like, that's what's offensive about it. So it's almost like that you're offended as a cineast and as a cinephile.
Oh, cineast. I love that word. That's on my poster over here. I got to cross off some movies.
The movies that you adore and love are being dismantled and deconstructed in ways that's clumsy and not even artfully done, that there could be a version. And also I think it's important what you're saying about like the kind of hate for their own audience, because I think this has broader social connotations. I think the movie...
Critical Drinker, if you're watching this, can you please do like an entire live stream like reacting to what I'm saying? Because like, I don't want you to miss like some of the things that I'm asking you about. Like, I want you, like, I'm really hoping like that some of these things will be addressed, you know, in some sort of substantive way. Like, I'm not trying to start drama. I'm not saying like, oh, you have to respond to me, otherwise you're a pussy. Like, I don't believe in that shit. I don't believe in that. I really don't. You don't have to respond to me. But if you are going to respond to me, like, can you do like a full, you know, like live, you know, it doesn't have to be live. Can you do like a full, like, hey, if I'm saying, I would love to hear your opinion on this, like you satisfy that part of my brain or something? I don't know. Like, you don't have to.
Movements we've seen, like, you know,
don't send it to critical. Don't harass anybody about this. I am not one of those people where I want you to send people shit about this. No, I am not one of those people. No.
This out, like the emergence of Trump, the emergence of Brexit, is the sense that people feel like the professional and media class hate them and do not represent them, whether that's politically or through the cultural content they provide. This is something I talked about sort of like for a while with the filmmaker Adam Curtis, who I very much admire, and it's been something I've learned more and more about over time, is that you have...
Adam Curtis is a really interesting documentary filmmaker. It's interesting to hear him referenced by Russell Brand, but yeah. I'm not surprised, I guess.
A professional class in journalism now that don't speak respectfully of, for want of a better phrase, working class people, working class culture. There's a kind of, there's a sort of an antipathy.
I don't know if the critical drinker knows who Adam Curtis is, though.
And loathing towards them. They don't like working class people, or in America, blue collar people. There's a kind of condescension and a snobbery. And it seems like, in a sense, this is one of the narratives that's playing out in film. I also want to mention, like in South Park, when they did, and that was with the last Indiana Jones movie, you know, like where they went, like they had, I think, Kyle coming out of a movie theater puking. Oh my God, what did they do to Indy? I can't believe what they did to Indy. You know, and like, what about the Imagination Land one? Where they were like, these characters are more real to you, like, you know, whether it's Jesus, and you know, I'm religious, it turns out. I figure you might be an atheist, but I believe in God and all sorts of stuff. But like, they're saying like that these characters are more real to you. Luke Skywalker's more real than like maybe your teacher or people. You know, these are people that you know, and that they've been vessels for your own personal development and your own understanding of your own
imagination,
darkness and your own aspirations, and to see
imagination,
see those things commodified when perhaps they
imagination
don't even care about identity issues.
Imagination.
Anyway, it's insulting. Maybe is that a good way of describing it?
Yes, and it's I best described it as like a lot of these franchises are things that have been created by geniuses and inherited by morons, and that's the problem because they don't have this creative skill to be able to make stuff like this. They're
kind of just rehashing the same shit that they've already said, and they're not really it feels like they're not really having a conversation at this point, you know? Like you're just kind of saying the same shit that you've already said.
Themselves. Like if you want to make a shit movie with shit characters, like fine, I don't care. Like maybe you're just not very good at this stuff. I'm not gonna get offended by it though. But if you want to cannibalize these existing characters that were made by someone way more intelligent and way more creative than you,
I don't agree that just like people in the 80s were like way more intelligent, and then like, oh yeah, everybody like. I get it. Like a lot of people that are remaking these things are doing so based off of characters that were created by people that were more intelligent and more creative than them. But like, I don't know. It feels like he's trying to get it a bit more than that. Maybe I'll hear him out a bit.
and humiliate them and try to use them to launch the shit things that you've made, that's when I've got a problem, because you are exploiting someone else's work.
It seems like he's got a bit more of a problem with the political angle being launched by the bad writing more than the bad writing itself.
Raping someone else's creativity. That's what you're.
Did he say raping?
Someone else's work. You're raping someone else's creativity. That's
raping.
what you're doing, but you're not adding anything productive to it. You're creating something worse to try and replace it. That, as a writer, as a storyteller, that really offends me, because I hate to see other people's work get taken advantage of.
Yeah, nice one, mate. We've got some good, this is some stuff from our community. Donny Jep, question for the drinker. Do you think there'll be a time in the future when Hollywood is making great movies again, or do you think that time has passed and something else like gaming will take its place?
I think
gaming.
Yeah, we're going to see a lot of gaming adaptations. The Last of Us was a real benchmark for that. I think we're going to see a lot more, movie or TV show adaptations of video games, because it's a massive, massive market. But I think also the time of this sort of mega blockbuster that cost $300 million is coming to an end, and I think we're going to see a lot more smaller things that they take more risks on. And yeah, they're going to have to start making better stuff. Otherwise, they will just.
Damn! I wish you would just like promote those smaller projects, and like, I wish I would say like, oh God, like, yeah, like recommends smaller projects to you, or like Sound of Freedom. The Whale was an Oscar movie. Like, yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna be too shitty about that one. Like that, that was a movie that I recommended. You know, like Boiling Point, Everything Everywhere, The Expanse, Ford v Ferrari, All Quiet, Arcane, 1917, Event Horizon, Dread, Fight Club, Blade Runner, Top Gun Maverick, Predator, Jaws, Invincible, Falling Down. Like, okay, we got your entire. Okay, here's your playlist that you made.
Normally,
like, oh, man, like The Boys, Cobra Kai, Chernobyl, Event Horizon, Falling Down, 1917, 4v Ferrari, Predator, Unforgiven, Blade Runner, Jaws. You didn't even like include The Whale in this playlist, by the way. Fight Club, The Expanse, 20. Whoa! Oh my God! The 2010, the year we made Contact. Oh, there was a big Sardonicast episode about that one. That was fun. Invincible, Arcane, like Spider-Man No Way Home, Whiplash, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Top Gun Maverick, All Quiet on the Western Front, The Whale. Oh, okay, here we are. The Whale, Boiling Point, The Menu, Sound of Freedom. Like, you talk as though you're promoting smaller things. You talk as though you're promoting anything that's not just like shoved into your fucking face by everybody else. That if I were watching this and I didn't know your content, I would just, I mean, if I were watching this and I only knew Russell Brand's content and I've never heard of you before, I would assume that you're like promoting smaller artists or something, you know? Like, damn, like it's a sad state where you have this gigantic platform and you're literally just only sharing things that like everybody already knows about.
And yeah, they're going to have to start making better stuff. Otherwise, they will just go bankrupt.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that's almost like decentralized, localized movie audiences, the same way that everything is perhaps becoming federalized in that way. This is from @BarryJohnFox.
Federalized.
Drink Up. What are your top 5 films, and have you seen all of David Lynch's films?
I have not seen all of David Lynch's films now, but he does some good stuff. But like, yeah, he goes down some disturbing roads with his things. Top 5 films. It's definitely not going to be done in terms of artistic merit or anything, but probably Terminator 2, Big Trouble in Little China. I think probably The Menu. I really love that.
That's in your top 5? That came out so recently.
Probably Nightcrawler, and yeah, I'm not sure what my last one would be. I'll come back to that one in a minute.
Okay, I'm sorry. I wasn't gonna. I held back on criticizing Big Trouble in Little China for being in his top 5.
Probably Nightcrawler, and yeah.
Damn. Terminator 2, Big Trouble in Little China, The Menu.
Big Trouble in Little China. I think probably The Menu. I really love that. Probably Nightcrawler, and yeah, I'm not sure what my last one would be. I'll come back to that one in a minute.
The Menu, the recent movie, The Menu. I ain't seen that.
That's really good. Really interesting. It's a very good critique of how we understand art.
Are you gonna do?
I can't wait to watch The Menu. I can't wait to see that.
A video on My Arthur remake.
My Arthur.
My Arthur. My Arthur.
I kind of avoided The Menu for a while because it seemed like normie bullshit, which I mean is being kind of reaffirmed by this. But I'll watch it. I wasn't gonna see it in theaters.
When I remade the film Arthur, no, maybe not Arthur. What about Get Him to the? I want to see a video by you on Get Him to the Greek or Sarah Marshall. The last thing I want to see is Arthur. Maybe I don't even want to see the My Arthur. No, I don't. Like when you were saying that stuff about reboots, I was thinking, oh man, like 'cause I loved Dudley Moore, I loved Arthur, the original film, and I see actually in a way I've got an inside scoop on how that stuff happens. Like I've done a few successful movies in Hollywood. They recognise that there's a window for me, a moment for me. Like they've got the rights to Arthur. It's cheap to do it. Even
if if let's say the most recent movie I've ever seen I thought was like legitimately in my top 5, there's no way I would say like, oh yeah, it's in my top 5. I would want to see it a second time, right? Like I would want to make sure, like I would want to have like that confidence about like its place in history, or at least in my brain, right?
Then they say, like, do you know what I found?
There's so many people where like you ask them like what their top movies are, they're like, oh, this movie from this year. It's like, damn, what?
Is that they were going to make, before Dudley Moore done Arthur, they were going to make...
Of all time this year, like Tar is fucking incredible. I'm going to give that a 10 on the second time I watch it, probably. I didn't do it the first time I watched it. Even The Lighthouse, I gave a 10 the first time I watched it. Maybe I had to think about it. I'm not gonna say that as like, oh, in my top 5, like of all time. You're not gonna let that sink in. Holy shit! I couldn't imagine including something in my top 5 that I didn't let sink in. That's insane to me. But to each their own.
With John Belushi, and I thought, after when it was too late, when the damage had been done, I was like, oh, that's the version of Arthur you want to do. Is an 18 or R-registered version. Like that's almost, you can see another take on that. But because it's economically motivated, they want it to be PG. It gets softened to the point where you can't even show him drink driving. How can
drink driving, very British.
And also, someone should have told me don't do that voice. Those two things could have saved us all a lot of time and trouble. I'm not going to push you to make videos on films that I've done. That's mental. I can't even believe I brought it up. I'm crazy. Vulcan Live says, Critical Drinker, I'm more excited about this than Dorsey, Tucker, or RFK. And then TN Base Girl says, his eyes look blue to me, but Russell said brown. Oh, maybe they are blue, yeah.
Yeah, they are. Hold on.
Oh, you got the eyes of a husky.
Pure killer.
He looks like a skinny Sargon of Akkad.
But this from Thomas Beard, Get Him to the Greek is like fine wine. It gets better with age. What film that I've been in or done are you willing to be nice about?
It might be Getting to the Greek, actually. It got a chocolate at me back in the day. So, yeah, it's been a good long time since I've seen it, but I do remember quite enjoying it.
Well, you better watch it again. Come on, mate. Let's try and build a relationship here.
Instant drinker recommends.
Okay, so what do you think about stuff like the re-editing of the Roald Dahl books and the sort of conversation around like Life of Brian and changing stuff like that? Where do you stand on that, mate?
It makes me fucking sick. I hate this idea of we need to like soften and we need to start altering these movies from the past without the permission of the people who made them, just to make them more palatable to modern audiences. Because God forbid someone might get offended by them somewhere. No, leave.
I agree.
Them the fuck alone. As far as I'm concerned, yeah, they should. These are works of art. They should be left alone as they were intended to be shown.
Yeah,
I agree.
Both with like in the case of Roald Dahl and in the case because I know that people Roald Dahl has in interviews outside of his fiction said some like overtly anti-Semitic stuff, like he said some mad shit. But like within the work, he doesn't say that in like Matilda or like Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. And again, it's what people like. They want. I tell you why. Do you know why that happened? I think Netflix did a deal and bought the Roald Dahl estate. Netflix were like, oh shit, we live in this sort of territory where those things are monetized and mobilized, i.e., issues around identity. Let's push for the Roald Dahl estate to reissue those books with edits and stuff. And I feel like I even like when I would never use the N-word. I would never make a racist joke. I'm against racism. I'm against hatred. But like I feel like like Enid Blyton books, and in a sense these are artifacts of their time. It's interesting because this cannibalism we talked about earlier, like that they have to use IP in order to keep their economic models going, is in a sense what the culture is doing anyway. It's what the whole culture is pulling itself apart. It's pulling itself apart about recognizing actually what you're going to have to do if you continue down this line is you're going to have a totally different set of principles almost around everything. You can't, like the royal family, our whole class structure, everything is predicated on colonialism, imperialism. You like, in a sense, you as Kahindi Andrews, who's a sort of a professor of black studies that I've spoken to, is like once you start this conversation, you cannot have Great Britain. Like it's gone. So it's like you got to work out where this, what the deal is.
I mean, I'm not a big fan of trying to erase history or trying to alter it to make it more palatable to people, because it's like you're trying to pretend that things, like mistakes that were made in the past, didn't actually exist.
I completely agree.
And so it's like you can't. There's like the good and the bad that comes with it, and I think you should just be honest about this stuff. And it filters through to movies and things like that. Like you can look at movies that were made like Gone with the Wind or whatever back in the 30s and 40s. Yeah, they don't align with our current standards or our current like cultural zeitgeist, but they're not meant to, because they were made in a very different time. But we respect the time in which they were made, and we can look back on them now and say, well, yeah, okay, that's changed since then, but it deserves to be shown because it's an artifact from when it was made.
Mate, thank you so much. You're quite right. It's pretty plain that all of your work comes from a place of genuine love of cinema and storytelling, and as you say, the currency of authenticity. Thanks so much, Will, for joining us.
I don't disagree with. I believe that his takes also. I literally agree with Russell Brand here. I believe that the Critical Drinker's takes come from a love of cinema and authenticity, but what he perceives to be as cinema and authenticity. Not my definition of that, right? I don't believe that he's a bad faith actor. I don't believe that he's like a bad faith, like, oh, I'm trying to just make my political beliefs for everybody and like blah 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 blah. Like, he's coming from a genuine place. I just think that it's like a very narrow mindset. And that again, I think I'm gonna reiterate what I said earlier, like, this guy's got fucking almost 2 million subscribers. Like, I don't think that there's that many people that are just like so bad faith that they're like, oh yeah, I want to pretend as if like I believe what he's saying. Like, a lot of people really connect with this shit. A lot of people really connect with it. We have to understand why. It's important to understand why. It's important to understand why people agree with this, right? So it's not as simple as just saying like, oh, he's lying. Or, oh, he's you know, just incorrect about it. Like, really he believes what he's saying. He believes what he's saying. I believe that.
To do some more stuff, I'd love to come on your show if you'll have me. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Absolutely. Thank you, man. It's been a pleasure.
Stay free with Russell Brand. See you first on
it?
Rumble. We can't make our wonderful content.
Damn! I saved. I saved a good 20 minutes here. Yeah, boy! I'm so happy that that's over. Oh my god. Jesus Christ. But yeah, I mean, like, the shit he recommends,
Sarah.
Sure, I haven't seen every video of his, but I feel like what I've seen, like, you know, I haven't just clicked on like, oh, people are being mad at this video. I've clicked on just random videos, and like, it all seems to say the same thing. Like, you have a series saying like, this is why Hollywood is bad, this is why modern movies are bad, and it all seems to say like the same thing, right? You have a very specific taste. You have a very specific, like, idea of what movies should be, and that's not necessarily wrong. That's not inherently wrong. Like, you can have your own taste and what you enjoy about movies, but as a person that consumes a lot of very different movies than you, and I don't know if you would even necessarily disagree with that. I'm gonna disagree with a lot of your takes. I'm gonna disagree with like a lot of your conclusions about like the film industry, because I feel like what you're saying represents a very narrow portion of the film industry. Is essentially my takeaway from that. I think I'm gonna go to bed.
Hey, it's August of 2023. Let's update the list of $5 and up patrons. Tyler Cukes, Nico Fuentes, Joel999, Speak of the Joker, Pasha Florence, Coolest Shirt, Just a Portuguese Dude, www.openclassactions.com, Valence, Amil, Brackets, Big Guy, No Rope, T-King, Saliv88, Josh Jones, Harper has a tumor in her head the size of a peanut, Yup, Caden Mack, Charisma, the Super 1 player, Zachary Kane, Gillyflower, Purple Fire, Gabriel Herrera, Hoofy Doe, and Lemonade Warrior is participating in the hit game Among Us and is considered the encroacher. Thank you to everyone who helped me after my channel was falsely demonetized. You guys are all so cool. Thank you. Stay safe.